Wanie na OK. I wrzucimy. Jak to się wrzucało? Ja to nie mam to tak, mam to tak nieprzećwiczone. O, tutaj 3 kropki. Wywal wszystkich. To nie to, nie?
Wyślij dodatkowe sample.
Tak, tak,
To
tak,
jest
tak,
to.
tak, tak, tak. A dlaczego on się każe mi przyłączyć? Poczekajcie chwileczkę. Tu jest runek z plomby. O, dobra. Dobra, już wiem dlaczego. Już wiem dlaczego. Tutaj i teraz tak, na żywo Facebook. Puści czy nie puści? Dobra. Share on page. Select page. No dobrze. Dobrze. Zacznijmy. Justin. Hello, my friend. Can you hear me? Oh, no, 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 no. I can hear you. You have to mute off. Mute on. Mute off, mute on.
Good evening to everyone, or good morning.
Yes, yes. Good morning. I think
Yes.
your place.
There's nothing like sitting down at 5:30 a.m. drinking rum with people around the world. So this is a good occasion.
What hour is in your place? 5:30?
5:30, correct. That's
Okay.
why we've got a
So
coffee
similar.
in one hand and a rum in the other.
Nice. We have in Poland all the time like that.
That's a good culture. I should spend more time in
Yeah,
Poland.
that's our culture. Yes, yes, exactly, exactly. So listen, Justin, I'll introduce you and project in really some short words, and after that I give you the power of this meeting, and I ask you about everything about your history, like we talked a few days ago, yeah. Everything about your project, about maybe your future plans for the next bottlings, next projects, everything we can expect from you in our European market. Okay.
Certainly.
So I can see how was his name from Killing.
He just sent me a message. He said he'll be there in 60 seconds, so he won't be far off.
Okay, okay. Więc kochani, few words in Polish language and after that your turn, okay? Give me a second. Tak więc kochani, witam serdecznie wszystkich na degustacji Dead Reckoning, australijskiego botlera, który tak jak inni butlerzy europejscy, no nie tylko europejscy, wyszukuje najciekawsze beczki, najciekawsze projekty jego zdaniem, które ściąga do siebie do Australii. Tam robi z nimi jeszcze różne rzeczy, o których mam nadzieję nam opowie, chociaż większość z nich jest opisana na butelkach i na jego stronie internetowej, więc co oczywiście zawsze działa w moim uczuciu na plus, na takie, kiedy bottler czy producent jest jakby transparentny, autentyczny, tak, to po tym moim zdaniem poznać, czy ma coś do ukrycia, czy nie. Ja na Dead Reckoning projekt trafiłem absolutnie przypadkowo. Kilka projektów w ten sposób tak zaczynałem też śledzić w przeszłości. Po pierwsze nazwa, tak, to się nałożyło oczywiście z nowym filmem mojej chyba najbardziej ulubionej serii filmów, natomiast gdzieś w międzyczasie w którymś ze sklepów europejskich zobaczyłem ten rum i było to dla mnie o tyle ciekawe, że nigdy wcześniej nie próbowałem, tamten rum wywołał we mnie dużą ciekawość, bo nigdy wcześniej nie próbowałem 20-letniego nierozcieńczonego Fidżi. Nigdy wcześniej. I zdecydowałem się wtedy zamówić butelkę, dodatkowo do tej butelki zamówiłem 2 albo 3 jeszcze inne i właśnie ta Fiji, czyli dzisiejsza Mutiny, która będzie na samym końcu, spowodowała, że ja na punkcie tego projektu może nie tyle zwariowałem, ale rzeczywiście zacząłem nastawiać oczy i uszy, co się tam jeszcze wydarzy. Napisałem wówczas do Justina, jakie ma plany na Europę i czy coś zamierza z tym zrobić. Trochę mi powiedział, nie mógł za wiele, dopóki nie dograł pewnego deala, który ostatecznie się wydarzył w październiku, we wrześniu albo w październiku teraz tego roku. I tak naprawdę te rumy przyjechały do Europy może z 3 tygodnie temu. Tak więc macie największą świeżynkę, chyba ze wszystkich, jakie pamiętam tak naprawdę, jeżeli chodzi o sprowadzanie rumów do Europy. No i tak od słowa do słowa udało się tą degustację zorganizować. No i mam nadzieję, że Wam się spodoba. Ja wszystkie rumy próbowałem już chyba 3-krotnie. 2 razy z tego zestawu, który przyjechał do mnie na cele tej degustacji i raz na festiwalu w Amsterdamie, na którym mieliśmy częściowo być razem, ale nie wszyscy dali radę, więc byłem tam ja i Piotruś i tam rzeczywiście tam sobie drugi raz, czy trzeci mój, testowaliśmy te rumy. Tak więc życzę udanej zabawy, udanej degustacji i przekazuję głos Justinowi. Justin, your turn.
Thank you. Well, welcome to Dead Reckoning Tasting. Here we go. Just before I start, we've got Sam Jones from Killick Distillery, so let's just give him 30 seconds.
Sam Jones, he is already with us. I can see him.
There we go. Perfect. Sam is here, and I believe Ben from the distillery will also be joining us as well.
Apologies, we're on.
So welcome everyone to, oh, there we go. We can see him. Welcome to the Dead Reckoning Tasting. It's nice to be able to chat with people across the world with the foreign international language of rum. I know the rum community is, we'll call it small in standards compared to whiskey or other spirit categories, but it's certainly a very passionate and in-depth category. We know that rum is by far the most, I call it the multi-dimensional spirit compared to any other spirit in the world. A lot of people will argue that, but I think rum wins it in every other way with how multi-dimensional it is. Thought I'd just start off with the Dead Reckoning story, or my story, as to how I became to be sitting here today. It's quite an interesting one. If we wind the clock back 26 years ago, I was working in Australia in the mining industry, and great money, but a very boring job. I was working on a large machine on an excavator, digging holes, and essentially you just fill that hole back in again. And you can only do that for so long. I stuck at it for a few years and saved up as much money as I could and bought myself a one-way ticket to southern France. So I flew into Nice, and I had a few friends working on billionaires' mega yachts down in Antibes and Cannes and Nice. So I got on down there and tried my hand at it and started as a deck scrubbing lad, scrubbing decks and scrubbing bilges on these billionaires' boats. And over time, I worked my way up the chain of command. So I went from a deckhand to a bosun to a second officer to a first officer and then a chief officer. And as I grew in my I suppose you'd call it command structure, so did the size of the boats. So the first boats I started working on were 60 meters long, so 180, 200 feet long. And then towards the end of my career, I was driving 123 meter, 7,000 ton, as long as a football field. And I worked for a rather interesting range of owners, a lot of Russian oligarchs, oil barons, Russians that owned soccer teams. I can't say any names due to the secrecy agreements that I had to sign, but I'll just leave it at that. There's only so many billionaire Russians that owned soccer teams. I worked for oil tycoons, billionaires that own mines. I worked for an Israeli arms dealer for a while. We'd quite often have movie stars, rock stars, musicians hiring the boat. So anyone that had $1 million to waste for a week. So $1 million got you a boat, but it didn't get you your food, your fuel, or your alcohol. It just got you a boat tied to a dock. Of course, you can drink, and I've seen it before. People would drink $500,000 worth of alcohol in a week. You know, if you're drinking 10,000 euro bottles of cognac for breakfast, and then bottles of Petrus 82 all day, and then you might move on to McCullum 30 year or 50 year. You can quite easily burn through $500,000 of alcohol in a week. So it was an interesting world that I got exposed to. The best thing about the job for me was international travel. So we'd spend summer in the Mediterranean, and in the Mediterranean, we'd go anywhere from Greece, Turkey, Croatia, and then all the way to the west, you know, Spain, France, Italy. Unfortunately, I wasn't on board when we went up to the fjords, so I missed out on all of Scandinavia. I was down in South Africa doing courses for those few months. But as soon as it started getting cold, and billionaires don't like cold weather for their holidays, so what we would do, we would take the boat from Europe straight across to the Caribbean. And there we would spend 6 months of the year, every year in the Caribbean. And that, to me, was always the highlight of a season, because it's just a lot more relaxed. And the Caribbean's full of rum and interesting people and great music and food. And not that Europe isn't, but for me, the Caribbean was just the next level up. And like any good sailor, when you're in the Caribbean, if you weren't driving a boat, you were in a bar or on a beach drinking rum. It's just what you did. As soon as you finished, you know, you'd go fishing, water skiing, diving, whatever it is, and then you'd end up on a beach drinking pina coladas or in a bar drinking rum. And what I did find, and what blew me away, was most bars over there, you'd look at the bar and there might be 100 bottles of spirits behind the bar, and there might be one vodka, one tequila, one gin, one brandy stuck in the corner, normally covered in dust, and the other 94, 95 bottles behind the bar were rum. That's what really started my rum journey. Was I sat there, and I was already a rum drinker before I left to go to the Caribbean. I was drinking, anyone from Australia would laugh at this one, but I was drinking a rum called Bundaberg rum, which I thought that's what rum was. It's a rather interesting flavour profile, I think you could call it. I soon learnt that we were poisoning ourselves back in Australia after tasting the amazing rum that was available in the Caribbean. So one by one, in every bar that I went to, I would say, "What's that bottle?" and point to it, try and learn about some of the history, where it was made, have a little mental note as to where it was from. Okay, that one's from Antigua, that one's from St. Kitts, that one's from Barbados. And mentally I was thinking, I need to visit this place. And luckily, over the 10 years that I worked on mega yachts, I did get to visit every island in the Caribbean, but sometimes 10, 15, 20 times over. You know, in a season, you might visit the same island 5 times. It all depends on where the billionaire wants to go on charter, or where the charter finishes, and then the boat might sit there for 2 weeks or 2 months waiting for the boss or a charter guest to come and join us. And when I wasn't working, then I started visiting distilleries. So now the mental note of what rums I like turned into, okay, where's it made? I have to go to that distillery. So back then, distillery tours weren't really a big thing. The world of rum gigs and the rum community was very small back then. Some of the big players, you know, like Mount Gay, they've always had distillery tours, but a lot of the smaller ones didn't. So I would just turn up and literally bang on their door and say, "G'day, Justin from Australia. I love your rum. Is there any chance I can speak to a distiller or walk around the distillery?" And 9 times out of 10, the answer was yes. So I get to meet a lot of good people in the spirits industry, namely the rum industry in the Caribbean. And this carried on for 10 years. And I do remember I had one boat that had a very strict captain, and the rule was no alcohol on board and 2 beers per person per day. A bit like being in the Navy, but without the rum. And I had to laugh because pretty much every bottle of rum that I saw that I hadn't already bought, I would buy. And my cabin, I had about 6 drawers in my cabin, and every drawer was full of a bottle of rum wrapped in bubble wrap. And all my clothes were kept in the bosun's locker with all the paint and supplies. And one of the crew members looked in and just couldn't believe what he was seeing. There's probably 60 bottles of rum in my cabin. For a dry boat, I think I had more alcohol than the local bar did. And unknowingly, what I was doing is I was pretty much going to rum university. To me, working in the industry hadn't clicked yet. It wasn't an idea. It was just me mentally visiting everyone, talking to everyone, and doing a 10-year rum university course. So as it came towards the end of my yachting career, I knew after 10 years, they're like dog years. The 1 year is equal to 7. It's very hard work. You're on 24 hours a day. You're at the beck and call of a billionaire. It might be 2 a.m. and he'll say, "All right, let's go to Sardinia," and you might be in Mallorca. Okay, we're today's steaming away. You just have to be ready instantly for any crazy request, or find me a helicopter. I want to go to a party, or it was always at the beck and whim of the billionaire, which was a good life, but it burns you out. So I was sitting in La Rambla, the main street of Barcelona, and I was sitting there with my wife on some time off, and we were drinking cacique, which you probably all know is a lovely little rum out of Venezuela. I was sitting there drinking a cacique with my wife, and I said, "I think when I leave yachting, eventually when we do one day, I want to start importing rum into Australia," because I knew what we had back home, and it wasn't much. Bundaberg rum, Myers possibly. There was very, very little. Bacardi white rum, that was it. So I knew the competition didn't really exist at the time. And it just clicked to me, and I said, "And I'm going to call it La Rambla instead of La Rambla." And my wife said, my girlfriend at the time, but we're now married, she said, "Oh yeah, that's nice. That sounds like a good idea." And it was about 18 months later that we did retire from yachting and moved back to Australia, up into a beautiful seaside town called Airlie Beach, because it's the closest thing I could find to the Caribbean. I wasn't ready to move back to a big city. I didn't like the cars and the traffic. I'd rather tropical islands, and conveniently, Airlie Beach is the biggest rum drinking community in Australia. So I felt quite safe in that little bubble of sailors and rum drinkers. And that's where I started importing rum, which was now 13 years ago. At the time, I didn't want to start my own brand. I didn't have the knowledge in the industry. So what I started doing was calling around a lot of the distilleries that I visited whilst I was in the Caribbean, and talking to the distillers and distillery owners, asking if they would like to be represented in Australia. And as I soon found out, a lot of these distilleries had previous agreements with companies, large international companies. Whether they wanted to release that in Australia, the answer more often than not was no. Mainly because they may have already owned, let's say it's a Diageo or a large company, they may already own 3 or 4 different brands. Why bring in another brand into Australia to compete with something they're already importing? So it was quite an arduous task. It took me about 4 to 6 months to eventually find a brand, which ended up being Cubanay rum out of Dominican Republic. That was the first brand I started importing 13 years ago. And that essentially was dipping my toe in the water of how the industry worked, which was also another steep learning curve. A lot of fierce competition. As soon as anybody tried the rum, a lot of people just discounted it and said, that's not rum, it doesn't taste terrible. You know, their perception of rum was it has to taste terrible because that's what some of our local rums tasted. Interestingly, some of the people saying, I only drink my rum with milk, it's the only way I can stand it. And I said, you're insane. Like, please just drink this neat without anything and you'll be amazed. So that was an easy sell. I think the selling direction was if you can get it on their lips, it was instantly sold. And that's how I slowly progressed into the rum industry. Let's fast forward another 10 years. It was during the first lockdown of COVID. I was sitting out the back of my house thinking how much I was owed by bars and bottle shops and casinos around the country, and thought, as we all did, it was doomsday. I thought, well, my last 10 years of work's gone down the drain. I'm owed so much money and all these bars are going to go bankrupt. I think I've pretty much lost it all. But like any person that's confident in their ideas or the rum category, I decided with every spare cent that I've got, I'm going to buy as much bulk rum as I can find around the world. And a lot of my friends said I'm absolutely insane. I've already lost potentially everything. But no, I went around and bought, let's think, about 3,000 litres of rum from different distilleries around the world and started shipping it back to Adelaide, South Australia. And that's what started the Dead Reckoning brand. I kept saying to myself, why am I building other people's brands and putting all my time and money into it when I could create my own, but I know I can do it better than anyone because of my passion, because of my contacts, and because of the 10 years of Rum University that I spent in the Caribbean. I think I know a lot more than a lot of other people do in the country. And that gamble, I guess, has paid off. That's where Dead Reckoning is today. So Dead Reckoning is now in December. The brand has now been up and running and alive for 4 years this December. And through some great people, I can see Knud Strand has joined us here. Through Knud, who's distributing through Europe for us. I've also got Michael from Rare Rum Club in the UK, now distributing Dead Reckoning in the UK. And I have Spaghetti Western Imports located in New York, who is now distributing Dead Reckoning in 45 states of the US. So in the 3 years, I've managed to get the rum into approximately 9 countries, including the US with 45 states. So I think it's been I've achieved a lot in that little time, but I think the Rum University and then the 10 years in the rum industry prior had essentially trained and set me up like an athlete. You can't jump into the Olympics on day one. You need that 10, 15, 20 years of getting up and jumping in a pool at 5 a.m. and swimming laps before you're going to win your gold medal in an Olympics. So the hard work has paid off. And now here I am chatting to some wonderful people across the world, including you in Poland.
You know what? I think this was one of the most beautiful stories I heard from people from rum industry. It's very, very nice. I mean, I'm really impressed. Really. I have no.
Don't cry, Chris.
No. You cried first. I saw you. That's nice. Yeah.
Has anybody got any questions before we talk about bottles and releases and that kind of thing?
You were saying that you were in bars in Caribbean that had like 100 different bottles of rum, and I was curious which countries it was, because in the main rum producing countries other than Martinique, like Barbados or Jamaica or Puerto Rico, I was rather disappointed by the choice there. So I'm surprised that you said they had like hundreds different rums, like kind of that were interesting. I was curious which countries it was.
One of the main ones was we spent a lot of time in Antigua, in particularly English
Okay.
Harbour. So anywhere that you're going to find, we'll call it the sailing community, rather than people that get off a cruise ship and might go to a bar. If you can find anywhere that the sailing community visits, some of the bars in
Oh, okay.
St. Martin as well, because they know guys that get off of these super yachts have got a lot of money, a lot of spare time on their hands, and they drink like fish. So they cater to them and stock a lot of rum behind the bars.
Cool. Thank you.
Certainly. Yeah, some of my favourites were, like I've just said, Antigua, English Harbour, because it was a very small harbour, small community, probably 4 or 5 bars, a really good scene where it didn't matter if you went out at 2 p.m. or 2 a.m., you could find a bar with 50 people and are willing to sit up all night and tell stories and drink rum with you. And it normally ended in some kind of mischief, jumping on a jet ski with someone, or, it was crazy times, crazy days. It's stuff you couldn't get away with these days, but 25 years ago, things were a bit more lax around the world. St. Martin was another big one. We spent a lot of time there as well. So St. Martin, for those that may or may not know, an island divided in half Dutch, half French owned. So get in a taxi and go to the French north part of the island. You were drinking amazing agricoles. Come down to the Dutch side of the island, and then you'd find more Spanish-style rums or British-style rums. But what was also a huge eye-opener was going to a lot of the French-owned or French Caribbean islands, Mystique, Martinique, and that's where the agricole side of the rum world started opening up to me as well. Was being from Australia, rum made from sugarcane juice just didn't exist. I'd never heard of it, and it wasn't until quite recently in Australia that anyone had dared to try and make something like that. It was all more of a very English-style rum made in Australia with molasses. So going to those French Caribbean islands was a real eye-opener, and being told how to make a tea punch or just the first smell of an agricole, I thought, what is in my glass? Like, what am I smelling? As you all know, it's different, it's vibrant, it's grassy, it's complete opposite end of the spectrum of what you'd find from an English-style molasses-based rum. So any questions about my past? Anything like that before we delve into where Dead Reckoning is now and possibly where it's heading in the future?
Yeah, I think we should start.
Certainly. So luckily we've got 2 experts from the distillery that this first rum is made in, or made. So first cab off the rank is Killick Rum from Victoria. We've got Ben from Killick, and we've also got Sam from Killick here. So rather than me rehearsing something that they know a lot more about, I'm going to pass it on to Ben and Sam as to a little bit about their distillery, how it started, why you make this amazing style of high ester, funky, unbelievably good rum. Off to you, Ben and Sam. We can't hear you, Ben. You'll have to click on your microphone on the bottom left of your screen.
I might start then. Can you hear me fine?
Yep. Go for it, Sam.
Thanks for having us on. Really appreciate it. Sorry, I'm sorry about the children. I had my wife's on a conference at the moment, so I'm kind of half juggling breakfast, half juggling drinking rum. So yeah, we're super excited to be here. So thank you so much for having us, Justin. It's been really good to develop a great relationship with you over the last couple of years, and we've got some exciting things on the horizon. So really keen, and thank you to the Rum Explorer. I haven't met you in person, but thanks for having us on. Really appreciate the fact. Hopefully we do get to share a rum in person one day. So just while Ben's getting his microphone
don't know.
sorted. Oh, he's all sorted. Well, so Ben's one of the owners and co-founders. I take care of most of the wholesale stuff, so you probably don't want to hear from me. So let's pass it over to Ben.
No worries. Thanks, Sam.
So-
Yeah, right. So I guess I'll go back to the start and yeah, we'll right from the beginning. So Killick is a project that began as a collaboration between myself, my brother, and our cousin. So it started a small sort of family business, you could say. We actually started off as home distillers when my brother turned 18 about 17 years ago. So we had an interest in interesting spirits. So we started off with some different things like corn whiskies and molasses-based rums at home down in the laundry, and sort of just started honing our skills back then, and just trying to make things that were as interesting as possible and different than what we could buy on the shelf. Because as Justin said earlier, a lot of Australians thought back then that Bundaberg rum was what rum was, and we thought it'd be interesting to try and make rum and see if it tasted the same. And we did that for a few years. We started then making some homemade or home brewed beer from mash. So we made some beer and discovered the world of sour beers and lambics and wildly fermented beer. So we started delving quite deeply into the sciences around fermentation. I myself was a microbiologist and biochemist by trade back then when I worked full time in pharmaceutical development. My brother Cal was in marketing design and engineering, and our cousin is a government health inspector, and so again another sort of microbiological expert. So fermentation really appealed to us. The gamut of flavors that we could find in sour beers that were all driven by fermentation just fascinated us. And so we decided after a few years of distilling and brewing that we'd really like to take the next step and go professional. And in Australia back then, the laws around bonded storage were a bit different, where if we went straight into spirits, we'd have to pay the taxes up front on the spirits that we made while they were aging before we could sell them. So there'd be 2 years at least where we had our stock aging in barrels before we could sell it, and we would have had to have paid the excise on that beforehand. So back then, opening a brewery was much more viable. So we opened our brewery, it was about 8 years ago now, and we were focused on sour beer. It was a fermentation heavy brewery essentially, where at the time a lot of breweries were making like pale ales and IPAs, a lot of hop forward beers. We were really all about the fermentation. So we had sour beer cultures down that we were growing for years and feeding and taking out from. We had a new different kind of sour beer being released every week, and we became known as a sour beer brewery. And it was about probably 3 or so years into the journey where we could, the laws were starting to change, and bonded storage became a thing where they would allow us to pay our taxes after the aging period. So we started then to transition back into distilling, and rum was our first sort of passion, and we just really wanted to get back to rum. And we'd by then had years of experience in wild fermentation, sour beer fermentation, things like that. And we'd over the time been keeping up with what was happening in rum and trying new rum new to us from around the world. And sort of had stumbled on to Jamaican style high ester funky rum, and I guess the similarities, the wild funkiness of this rum that we discovered sort of tied in with our love for this wild funky sour beer that we loved, and like, well, this stuff is amazing. And so we sort of got our hands on as much of this high ester funky rum as we could. Like, well, this is where we want to go. This is our sort of jam, So we started back again with our fermentation and experimentation with how we could make as much ester as possible and get it into a rum. So we started then building our stills. Cal's sort of engineering background meant that we could design our own stills, build them from scratch, make the equipment the way we wanted it to be, so that we could use it to our best ability. And we started with a 50, then a 200 litre still, and then we built a 1,000 litre still that can be run either as a column still or a pot still. It's interchangeable. And it's been now since about the start of COVID is when we decided to open our cellar door, the second venue, which was just focused on rum. So it's a restaurant and rum bar where we can take all of our products and sort of showcase them there. It was due to open in March of 2020, and 2 weeks before the opening date, the COVID hit and the lockdown hit, and we were delayed for a year. Then after the year of lockdown, we were finally allowed to open again for about 3 or 4 months, and then there was another lockdown again for about another year. And so we just sort of did our best to deliver rum online and just do what we could to sell to anyone everybody was at home buying alcohol online apparently. So we actually managed to move a lot of product through online sales, which is really handy and got us through. And we were finally able to reopen, and now we have that site going strong, and we're producing now more rum than we've ever made down at our distillery site. We've started with Justin, obviously. Now we've got some dead reckoning that's been sent off overseas, which is incredible to see that some of our products are now offshore, and it's just it feels like a great achievement to have made rum that's not only available around Australia but now being shipped around the world. We've had some other interest with bulk orders for overseas companies as well that are now working with bottling our products and distributing them overseas, and it's been just humbling to see that people are like we thought our rum was good and we like the high ester stuff, but to have people sort of validate that by ordering it and trying to share it with other people around the world, it's just it's been fantastic, and it's been a fantastic journey.
I think it's important to say too that there is no we don't have any domestic high ester rums here in Australia. We're the very first. It would probably be 1 in 100 people would actually understand what a high ester rum is. So not only are we playing in a category in Australia, which is it's full of perception and some negative, some positive, but the tides are changing. Everyone's starting to open their eyes. A lot of Australian people want rum to be whiskey, but we have to educate them that it's not going to be whiskey. It never will be whiskey, but it will be just as enjoyable as whiskey. So, I think Ben and Cal, chose the hard path, but at the same time, I think it will be the most rewarding path. So, it's really exciting time to be part of this business. So thanks, Ben.
No worries at all. So we'll, I guess, talk about the release. So what to expect from some of our high ester white spirit. It's the ester count. I'm still working on getting that back from the lab, but I haven't got the exact counts yet. But we find that we get sort of a profile with our rums where you get a very at first the most in your face sort of character is these tropical fruits that you'll get. There's the pineapples and banana esters and mangoes and papayas and things like that are just so upfront. But then once you start to really let it sit for a bit and then keep sort of sipping on the rum, this incredible creamy undertone of almost like strawberries and cream. The more dank fruit sort of sit underneath, like your mangoes and papayas. The esters that are in solution, they're all created through fermentation, being an extended mixture of open and closed fermentation that we do. The esters are all hydrophobic esters, which means I'm sure most people probably know here that the esters basically don't like the introduction of water. So it's a interesting, really interesting spirit to try first, just a little neat, and then add some water to it, even just a few drops. And the nature of the esters, once water's created or added to it, sorry, it explodes out of the glass. It becomes like this fruit bowl of tropical fruits and strawberries and cream and milks, and some people even find like different sort of cheesy characters coming from them. It's just exciting to know that these esters all come from the fermentation of yeast and bacteria, and it's all just the slightest change in condition can alter the end product so varied, so wildly. If we can look at things like temperature and pH and oxygen or carbon dioxide in solution, and we can sort of push these fermentations the way we want to express different characters. And I think this release here, we've just got a really good blend of the tropical fruits and the other sort of really interesting funky characters, which you might feel like reminiscent a little bit of maybe blue cheese or cream or milk, and they blend surprisingly well with these tropical fruits. That it makes it for a really interesting spirit.
Really good description, Ben. Yeah, I think everyone's got a glass in their hand, and if they don't, put one to your nose. But there's no right or wrong answer with tasting. Some people get coriander, some people get cayenne pepper. No answer is right or wrong. I definitely get bubblegum or milky bubblegum, if anything could exist. A milky bubblegum that's quite creamy with this release.
Yep,
and like I asked you, make something that's more off the Richter scale than what you would normally put out in the Australian market, because as we know, the Australian taste I think we're about 10 years behind where mainstream Europe or the US is with their rum appreciation. And this particular release that we came up with was always destined for export only. I think as time comes, like you said, you're ahead of the curve and you've taken the hard path. But I think as people's flavour profiles mature over time, you're going to be certainly head and heels above the rest of a lot of your rum, we'll call it competitors in Australia.
Yeah,
and it's
certainly.
nice to see your rum everywhere as well. Like you've said, yeah, your rum's now in 45 states in the US and nine countries around the world.
It is incredible. Yeah. Yeah, like you say, I think being a little bit far behind here in Australia, places like the States and Europe, they're much more accepting already of high ester rums. They've the cocktail market in the United States, especially around the sort of California area, they're screaming for high ester rum because they know how valuable it is in cocktail making. I think that's sort of our approach when we're trying to educate people here in Australia without having the rum bar as our salad door. It's very cocktail focused, and as I was saying before, these the rums like this one with the high ester content, the hydrophobic nature of the esters that give it all these crazy flavors. And bubblegum's definitely a good descriptor of one of the characters in this rum. Being hydrophobic, when you make cocktails with them, the majority of cocktail ingredients being fruit juices, especially tiki cocktails, and those fruit juices have a high water content. So as soon as you use this sort of high ester white rum in these cocktails, the esters just go to town in the cocktail, and you end up with this funky creation. It just brings life to cocktails. So it's a really good way that we've found to introduce people to what the really funky rum down here, and they're starting to see an appreciation. I think over the last couple of years, we've even noticed. It's not been a long time, but people have already started to understand a little more about that rum's not just Bundaberg, and we're starting to see that shift. But as you say, I think it's maybe at least another 5 years behind catching up with Europe and the States, and so it's a fantastic opportunity to be sending it over there already, get some recognition over there that people can start discovering what it's for and how to use it, and hopefully that will trickle back to Australia as well, and we'll see where we go from there.
Great description. And while we've got everyone here and while everyone's got a little glass in their hand, are there any questions for Ben or Sam? While we've got the experts and while we've got their amazing rum sitting in our glasses.
How does this high ester profile comes from? I mean, it's a matter of long fermentation, special kind of yeast, or you use special techniques like in Jamaica. I mean, dunder and muck pits, or what?
Yep. So yeah, like the Jamaican styles, we do have a market. So it's not as easy for us being in a industrial complex where our distillery is. We can't dig a big hole in the ground, but we have multiple different tanks made out of different materials. So that helps with whether or not we have them fully open, semi-open, or there's closed fermentation as well. But yeah, we have 6 different dunder tanks at the moment of varying sizes and oxygen contents. We have each one has its own culture going, which some of them started back from when we were home distilling many years ago now, and we've been feeding that and taking from it like a Solera system. Some of them are newer. Dunder and muck, it's an environment of its own, so it's the sort of thing that not all tanks are successful. So they have varying degrees of character to them, I guess you could say. That some of them, they don't survive, say, a winter. Seasons matter a great deal. Our summers are really, really hot here. Some of the dunders really thrive. Because they're a mixture of yeast and bacteria, and they're for the most part wild yeast and bacteria. Some really thrive in hot climates. Some prefer the cold. So it takes seasons for these dunder pits and muck pits to change, and we have to just continuously monitor those to essentially test for the characters that we're after. You really become good at learning what the esters are going to be perceived as both pre and post distillation, because it's quite a different beast. But yeah, we have an extended fermentation process as well. So we do a mixture of closed and open fermentation, pre-distillation. We have our muck and dunder as well. So yeah, it's a bit of to answer your question. Yeah, it's a combination of muck, dunder, and extended fermentation.
A lot of experiments.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, coming from a scientific background and the fermentation-based beer background that we have, it's all about fermentation for us. It's a heavy focus of our distillery. So it's as much about the pre-distillation as it is post-distillation and aging for us. It's a mixed passion.
Okay.
What kind of stills do you use? Because you said that you get to design a little bit of your own stills. So what's the difference? Yeah.
So yeah, we have 2 different column stills. Well, size-wise, with the boilers attached to 200 and a 1200 liter still, both with columns. They both have a 4-column or a 4-plate option. The 1200 liter still also has a 6-plate option. And the 1200 liter still also has a pure pot option, and our 200 liters still also can be run as a retort still, so with the thumper in between as well. And then we have a range of sizes going down from that we use for experimentation. So anything from we've got a couple of stills that are only 2 liters. We've got 50 liter stills, then we've got the 100s, the 200 liter still, and the 1200 liter still. So yeah, we've got pretty much, if we want to try out a different distillation method, we've got a still for it.
It's exciting. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's interesting to hear Cal's got in there and built a lot of this stuff in his own. It's very much down the Moba road where Robert Greaves is an engineer and has done the same thing. Why buy something when you can make it yourself? Do a little bit of study, look into it, and possibly make I'll call it a Frankenstein still in the kindest way, but you're making something that will create its own flavor profile that possibly no one else can recreate.
Yeah, actually, it's one of a kind. So it's yeah, as you say, yeah, very hard to recreate. I guess yeah, what it does, it's the only one that does it. So that's yeah. Again, our rum, as you know, has quite a unique flavor profile, especially within Australia, and it's every part of our process is unique to, as far as I know, Australian rum distilleries, like right down from the fermentation from the beginning right through to the still being unique. So it's I think that it all helps to make a unique product and to give Killick its sort of very distinctive flavor profile. It's getting easy now to for people to pick up a rum and try it, and they'll know if it's Killick. Essentially, it's got our hallmarks.
Definitely changing. We're starting to notice now, being 2.5 years old, Ben, about that.
Yeah, there.
people,
Well, for the rum side of things, yeah, getting back to it.
yeah,
2.5, 3 years.
and yeah, people are starting to come up to us. Yeah, sorry, Ben is here. Yeah, never mind. Lost my train of thought. People are starting to smell in the glass, and they're going to really sort of notice that that aroma and why it's different. And it's really positive to see people picking that up and going, yeah, I know that's Killick or an Australian funky rum. Yeah, Killick, that's what we're looking for. So it's give it a couple more years and more people will be saying it, or you guys in Europe will pick it up and go, gee, that smells different to my other high ester rums that I've got. Maybe that's something a little bit different. I'll go and see I'll go and explore where that is. So yeah, it's very exciting.
Mm-hmm.
I think the only thing I can compare it with that probably a lot of people may have tried is a DOK. Something I think it's a little bit more off the Richter scale and higher again, but in a comparative sense, I think you've pretty much come close to that in a global sense. And you're correct, people will globally be able to pick a glass up and go, oh wow, this must be the new one from Killick, which it's a real individual signature of identity which you've come up with, and definitely commend you for that.
Yeah, thank you. It's it's sort of always been the goal. I mean, things like DOK really impressed us when we try them and to make products that could be put side by side with that sort of quality of liquid, and to have people talk about them in the same sentences. It's always been it's something we strived for. But it's fantastic that it's sort of getting to that level that people are trying it and comparing it in that way. It's just humbling. It's incredible.
What does it mean, Killick?
So the word Killick, it's a very old term. Comes out of Scotland. It was the original sort of anchor. Before they used iron anchors, they'd use a Killick, and it was a construction of stones encased in wood, and that was essentially what they used as an anchor for their boats, and it was called a Killick. So we thought it's sort of it's a nice it's a palindrome when spelt without the C at the end, which is very, very pleasing. It's got the nautical ties being an anchor, and it's got the history. It's an old sort of now unused term, but we thought old nautical brings it sort of rum and sailing together again, and it's just sort of where we landed.
Okay. Nice.
Ben, it was very interesting to hear your journey from brewing beer, discovering lambics, to distilling rum. Could you tell us a little bit more about the yeast and bacteria cultures that you're using? Is it something similar to lambics, or do you have something different for the rums?
Yeah, no, it's similar. So it ranges with our primary closed fermentation. Then we use it's a blend of different like the Saccharomyces cerevisiae that we would have used back for our beer production. But then the muck and dunder really bring a bit of a curveball into it, being wild fermentations. There's a mixture of yeast and bacteria in there that just completely wild. So it's the count, the biological count in those ferments is through the roof. So it'd be really hard to sort of pin down an exact list of the organisms that are in those sort of those pits, and that gets introduced later on. But early on, yes, the primary fermentation, very similar to the way the lambic beer was created back in the day. It's a primary closed fermentation with the Saccharomyces cerevisiae. Then after the primary fermentation, we go into an open fermentation. And that's when we, well, it depends. Sometimes, depending on the batch, we'll do it's a lactic acid fermentation. So it's more similar to what you might find in your things like a Berliner Weiss. And then post that, then we'll go into the extended open part of it, where it's more like the lambic style, where we'll introduce some of the lambic yeast strains, things like that, to really sort of sour it up, start creating those organic acids. And then post that, once yeast, once muck and dunder become involved, then it's more of a sort of art than a science, I guess you could say.
Okay, thank you very much.
No worries.
Thank you. It's a really good breakdown of Killick and our first tasting. So I think we've got, is it 7 that we're going through tonight?
Yeah, 7. Yeah.
7.
We've
picked the Grand Slam. Well done.
Well, thanks for having me there, guys, and thanks for opening with Killick. And it's been great to have the opportunity to talk about it. It's always a pleasure to discuss the products and rum in general. So yeah, thank you, Justin.
Thank you, Ben and Sam. And I do know you guys have probably got to. Is it a public holiday today in Melbourne?
Yeah,
it is. Yes.
Not that we care too much about horse racing, but it still is a public holiday.
Yeah, I'm seeing it as a good excuse to drink at 5:30 a.m. and drink 7 different rums, and then go to Haynes & Co. and continue to drink, and maybe look at a horse running somewhere today.
Sounds like a good plan. You can't go wrong there.
Yes. Yeah, today is a no work, no transport day, no getting behind the wheel of any sort of car, which is great. So if you need to disappear at any time, I do thank you for joining us, and thank you for your awesome work. And I really look forward to what you're bringing out in the future, and hopefully some more Dead Reckoning releases that we can bring into Europe and the US as well, with weird, funky, different barrel aging and that kind of stuff as well.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks again.
Awesome.
Thanks again for having us, and enjoy the rum.
I must add something. Ben and Sam, thank you very much, guys, for joining our session. And I must confess in the end to something, because before we started our evening, I tried your rum in daiquiri, because I did 4 months ago, I think the biggest daiquiri competition in the world now, and rum used to daiquiris. And when I tried your rum, I thought that the next edition, next year, daiquiri competition, I will use also your rum to this.
Awesome.
So fantastic.
So we will be in touch for sure. And I'm super curious how it goes in this competition.
That sounds great. Well, you'll end up with a very interesting and funky daiquiri, there's no doubt about that.
Exactly. So one more time, thank you very much, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks so much, everyone. Have a good enjoy. Sorry, I've got the kids. I'll leave you. I'll get them out of the hair. See you later.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, bye.
So,
it's all yours, Chris. You want to take us into the next one? It's your show, and I'm just a guest of honor.
You know what? I had an idea to taste in that turn. That now let me know. Am I right? Now we go to Antelope. Yeah. The next one, Nelson's Dockyard. Next one, Barbados PX. Next one, Barbados Port Cask, then MOBA, and the last one, Mutiny. What do you think? Is it good turn or not? Okay.
That's a good order. Yeah, that works well. So I've got the wrong one in the wrong glass, so I'll just move this one along. And we'll put some antelope in the glass. So HMS Antelope is a creation that I came up with. So those of you that don't have the benefit of seeing the label, HMS Antelope is named after a British destroyer that served in World War II. It was also the destroyer that my grandfather served on for 9 years. My grandfather named Sid Bosley or Sydney Bosley in the British Navy. So the HMS Antelope, very colourful career. I wouldn't call it that, but everything from helping chase down the Bismarck, and then unfortunately looking for survivors of the Hood. Was also the first ship to single-handedly sink a U-boat, submarine. Did a lot of extensive operations in the Atlantic. Also the invasion of Northern Africa and Sicily. Also took part in the D-Day invasion. So as we all know, our Navy rum history, the British Navy was served a tot of rum every day from 1700s onwards. And that continued up until July 31st. I think it was 1970, correct me if I'm wrong. So I looked back through the archives, and in particular, what the British Navy would have had in 1939 and 1945. Now, the blend changed, and it changed depending on what was available at the time. So I wanted to give my Navy rum, and it wanted to be factually correct. So we included a rum from Australia, from an unknown distillery, but one of our guests on here tonight may have worked for that distillery. That's all I can say. You'll be able to put the A and B together there. We also had a Jamaican rum in the blend, which comes from another distillery, possibly with the initials WP. The reason why I can't say these is because when you purchase rum, a lot of distilleries don't want you to mention their rum, whereas some are quite happy for you to mention their rum. The third component was a rum from Guyana, and I think you can all work out where rum from Guyana comes from. So fourth was from Trinidad, and there's only one distillery running in Trinidad. And the fifth was from Barbados. And Richard Seal, I've had a chat with him, and he's more than happy for me to say that it comes from Foursquare. So it took me quite a while to come up with this blend using different components, and it was more of a just sit back over a month with each of these different rums in front of me and mixing and blending and coming up with what I thought was the perfect mix. I think what you're looking for in a blend is no rum should overpower the other, because then you've lost the other four rums in the blend. If we put too much Jamaican rum in this, the funkiness would blow the rest out of the water and you wouldn't taste anything but Jamaican rum. So what you're looking for in a blend is the fine art of balancing everything between each other, so you can go through a rum journey in your glass. You should be able to taste individually all of those different rums on the nose, on the front palate, the middle palate, and on the finish. And then when you've got an empty glass, 10 minutes later, when you smell that glass, you should be able to get a different distillery as well. That's the art of the perfect blend. So I did bring this rum out in Australia in 2021. And what I've done for the HMS Antelope that's been released in Europe through Knud Strand at KNS Spirits or Left Hand Spirits, is I aged it for an additional year in Australia. So some of the ages of the rum that went to Europe was a 5-year-old pot still from Australia, a 5-year-old column still from Trinidad, a 5-year-old pot still from Jamaica, 6-year-old pot still from Guyana, and a 6-year-old pot and column still from Barbados, plus an additional 1 year in Australia. Now, one thing I will mention now is we'll call it a phenomenon. So living in Adelaide, South Australia, it's the driest state in the driest continent in the world. We have the lowest recorded humidity in the world. And a lot of people will think, well, what difference does that make to aging rum? Unbeknowingly, at the time when I started aging rum, I would take a measurement of the ABV before it went in the barrel. And then 6 months later, I would take a sample out, take it home, measure the ABV, write my tasting notes, write where I think the rum is now and where it could be headed, whether it's good or bad with more time in the barrel. And what I couldn't understand was why my ABV kept rising. And I went down and took another sample and checked my Anton Palm meter and thought, it's still rising. I don't understand what's going on. And I spoke to a few people, and people that were in the know said, yes, if it's in a low humidity climate, what will happen is your water molecules in your barrel will evaporate faster than your alcohol molecules. I posted it online, and there's only one way to describe it, as a shitstorm of people telling me, I'm a chemical analysis engineer, I've been to university and I've been to this and I've been to that, and I think you're full of it. And all I kept saying was, this is my results. You know, I'm not a master distiller. I buy pre-distilled rum from around the world. I'm an independent bottler. These are just my readings. And it wasn't until Richard Seale stepped in and said, actually, Justin is correct. He's in a very low humidity climate where the water molecules evaporate faster than your alcohol. So what I find is you're left with a more intense flavour. It's like anything. If you mix yourself rum and water, or a rum and Coke, or a cordial and water, if you add more cordial to your water, it's going to be a stronger, more intense flavour. What I'm finding with aging in South Australia is the ABV goes up, the flavour profile is more intense. Now, I know another distillery well known by the name of Beanley did some desert-aged maturation rum in the desert of South Australia. And I think it was the 2015 release. Steve McGarry might be able to tell me which one it was. It was released through Velier. I think that was one of the favourite bottles of the year. Is that correct, Steve? Do you remember what year that Beanley release was that was desert age maturation?
Yes, that's the 2015 Valier release.
There we go. So Beanley rum stumbled upon the phenomenon as well, that if you did age rum here, low humidity, high temperature. So in summer, we can get anything up to 49 degrees Celsius in the interior or in the desert. And in Adelaide, the highest we've had is 47 degrees Celsius. So if you can imagine a humidity of 5% or 7% with 47 degrees in a barrel aging warehouse, the kind of effects it's going to have in your barrels are pretty unbelievable. And I essentially stumbled upon it. I didn't know this upon aging rum in South Australia. It was just a fact that the flavour got better and the ABV went up. So back onto the Antelope. I know when it was released in Australia, a lot of people were blown away by its complexity, and a lot of people said blend of the year or rum of the year, which I was quite proud to come up with a blend of my own that was not only named after my grandpa's battleship and sort of paid homage to his time at sea. I've also got a photo of my grandpa, which is probably a resemblance of me on there. to somewhat, and my eldest son is a splitting image as well. So on the nose, I get a lot of stone fruit and jackfruit, fresh green apples. There's only the slightest hint of the Jamaican distillery, which, as I found, if you add a couple of more millimeters of the Jamaican, it made the other rums obsolete. You couldn't taste them anymore. So it was a fine balance between each individual rum. So a lot of people will describe this as like a rich Christmas pudding as well. Quite creamy, custard. There's also, you get your funk there, very small amount, tropical fruits presence, and fresh green apples. And like I said, there's no right or wrong answer. You get coriander, someone else gets cayenne pepper. So I'll be interested to see what people think of this, that you're all trying it now, and whether you've got any questions on this particular release and blend.
I would say for a navy, it's very delicate, at least to me. I'm usually, I would say, shocked and hit when I drink something from navy style. And but indeed, as you mentioned, it's sweet, but it's in the same time very herbal. And I think colander it's something that I taste as well. And it's citric, but also maybe a little bit ginger on the nose for me. But really nice one, refreshing.
Because it was first released for the Australian market, I didn't want to bring out a rum that scared people off. I wanted it to be delicate as well, and a combination of sweet and savoury. When I say sweet, I don't mean sugar sweet. I mean the sweetness you can get out of a beautiful pot and column still rum with no sugar added or no additives. This was my first try at a blend as well. And like I said, it took me months to come up with the correct mix in the end, the correct blend. And that was a fun little experiment, having all these different bottles in front of me and making a blend every day and writing it down and finding that how different your flavour, your taste buds change over time. So what you tried at 7 a.m. is different to what you try at 2 p.m. Your taste buds change. And I think the best time to drink rum is just after breakfast. Well, like this morning, I've had no breakfast and a glass of water, which is probably the best awakening for your taste buds. And you can really get the flavour now that it's not ruined by coffee or bread or cereal or whatever it is, or fruit you may have for breakfast. It's a real delightful blend, that one. Came out at 55%. So I released this into Europe and the US, and I've kept, I think I have 100 litres left sitting in a barrel here in Adelaide, South Australia, which I'll release for the Australian market probably for either Anzac Day, which is a commemoration of the Australian Anzac Forces on the 25th of April, or Remembrance Day, which comes up in a few days, the 11th. I'm a bit undecided. It'll just depend on what it's like in the barrel. I think it would benefit from another full summer in Adelaide, and we're predicted to have a very hot, dry summer coming up. We're going into a drought here, so it's going to expect some pretty intense flavour to come out of that barrel in the next 6 to 8 months.
With a higher ABV.
With a higher ABV, again, it just continues to rise. So it's not unusual for something I put in the barrel. By the time I release it, you'll have anything between 6 to 8, maybe 10% ABV rise over its time in the barrel, and that's only over anything from 18 months to 3 years and that's all down to atmospheric conditions as well. Everybody's individual barrel aging warehouse will be different. It's even geographically different. So I have friends that own distilleries 20 kilometres where I'm aging my rum, and they don't have a rising ABV. They're a lot higher in elevation. They have very cold, wet winters. They have a very small rising ABV in summer, but then it drops rapidly over winter, a bit like a Scottish climate, I believe. Whereas where I choose to age my rum out in the northern suburbs of South Australia is a lot drier, and over winter, not as cold and less humid environment. So while I'm talking about the Australian dry aging is the term I've come up with it. I've actually got a little experiment coming up of a Jamaican rum blend that I've purchased and come up with a blend of my own, and I'm going to be aging half of it in far north Queensland, in Port Douglas. So extremely hot tropical climate, and it's probably the closest thing you can get to Jamaica or the Caribbean. And then the other half will be aged in Adelaide, South Australia, just to see what the two different climates produce. And it will be a 2-bottle release in a pack. So same rum, same ABV, aged in 2 different climates in Australia. So geographically, we're talking about 3,500 kilometres away. Adelaide, South Australia being right down the south. So if you drove 3,500 kilometres to northern Australia, that's where the second half of the rum will be aged. Any more questions on the HMS Antelope?
Yes, yeah. Was Australian rum used in real Navy blends in the past, or is it your idea?
No, everything I do is factual. I believe there's too much bullshit involved in the rum industry. Now, I think there's enough real facts in the world from the last 300 years of rum not to come up with stories of sea monsters and finding rum buried in a sand dune. And so everything I try and do with Dead Reckoning is factual. So yes, indeed, Australian rum was used in the Navy rum blend. Now, Steve, if you can give us a 1-minute spiel on the history of Australian rum used in the Navy blends and actually where it was stored and where it was loaded onto Navy ships in World War II.
Thanks, Justin. I'll try and keep it to a minute. Basically, the 3 main distilleries in Australia, that being the Beenleigh Rum Distillery, Bundaberg Rum Distillery, and also what's known as CSR Pyrmont Distillery, which was in Sydney. Those 3 producers were contracted to the Royal Navy to supply Australian rum, anywhere from 1914 through to the 1960s, so covering both World War I and World War II, to the point where the Bundaberg Rum Distillery actually supplied all of their stock, and they were then out of rum and couldn't supply the domestic market in Australia for over 2 years because they'd given all of their stock to the Royal Navy. And as we understand it, there was still Australian rum used in the Navy top up until the mid-1960s.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, it's a hard subject to talk in 60 seconds. We could literally do a 4-hour podcast or a Zoom chat on Navy rum, as we all know. But yeah, that's quite interesting. And I've seen some great photos that Steve once shared with me of a naval ship docked up against, a couple of 100,000 litre storage tank on the docks of Sydney, literally just feeding into holding tanks on this naval ship, no doubt headed for Deptford Yards in the UK to add to their amazing little blending facility that they used to have there. Any questions on the Antelope before we move on to a Barbados PX? No? All right.
Antigua.
Antigua. Now I'm-
Antigua? Okay. Antigua. Antigua is the only one I don't have. And the only reason being I drank it all. So I'm going to go off a memory off this one because I know it quite well. This release was an easy one for me. So I spent probably 3 months a year, every year, docked in English Harbour in Antigua. Now, as you all know, English Harbour make an amazing series of rums. I think their most famous are 5-year and a 10-year English Harbour. They also make some local domestic releases by the name of Cavalier, or Cavalier, which is a very cheap rum made for the local market. I think I used to buy it for about $1 to $2 a bottle when I lived back there, and it was a staple. You know, if someone went to the shop to buy milk or bread, the crew would just throw them $20 and they'd come back with several cases of Cavalier just to keep the crew going for the next few days while we were finished work and having drinks after work. So it was an easy choice for me. Quite often I would visit the distillery and they weren't doing distillery tours, but I'd just be banging on the door saying, please open up, I need some more English 10-year, which back then was probably 25, 30 US a bottle. I don't know what it is now. I think it's into the hundreds, quite hard to find. And they got to know me in the end. They just open up and go, oh, it's Justin again. Okay, here you go. Here's a case. Here's the money, and off I would go. So when it came time to release a release from Antigua, I contacted some of the people that I met many, many years ago when I was living back there. And I was lucky enough to be sent a dozen different barrel samples. And I went through the individual samples, working out what I wanted. They were a bit reluctant to sell age stock because they were quite low on stock of their own to release under the 5-year or the 10-year banner of their own. So I opted for quite a young rum from Antigua, knowing that if I aged this in Adelaide for a period of time, it's only going to get better using the Australian dry aged method, knowing that the flavour profile will only intensify. So what I used for this one was an Apera cask. So a lot of you people may think, what is Apera? It's fortified wine, or essentially an Australian sherry cask. And if you could define it closely, I think it's probably closer to a PX rather than a Oloroso. And I left this in the cask in Australia, in Adelaide, for 2 years. So over those 2 years, I had quite a high evaporation rate, but also a very high increasing ABV. It went through 2 very hot summers. Our third summer in Adelaide was flooding conditions, so very wet, not as high a temperature and a higher humidity. But the English Harbour went through some pretty intense hot summers, and it was actually through 2 different aging facilities. I actually had to change bonded stores and aging facilities halfway through. So this barrel spent its life in 2 different places. What I like out of the Antigua was the flavour profile of very dry fruit, dry figs, prunes as well is another one I get out of it, or sultanas, but also that real richness that you get as well from an Antigua rum. Toffee apple, shredded coconut. What else have we got? Fresh green apple is what I get as well. Granny Smith apples, they call them here. But also a very custardy flavour as well, which is quite a complex. It's what I find with Australian dry aging. If you put a rum in that may have 2 or 3 different flavour profiles, by reducing its water content, what you end up with is just a lot more intense flavour, and you've turned a rum that's got 2 or 3 flavour profiles into now a completely huge different fruit basket, where you might have half a dozen or a dozen different flavour profiles you can get out of the same rum. The finish, I find, is also sort of like a dark espresso coffee and mild white pepper. So what I've found with this one is, if I've finished a glass, I'll leave the glass, and you might come back the next morning. You know, the glass may be still sitting on the bar, and you smell that glass and think, wow, okay, that's where I get that. It smells like a coffee cup that was left out from the day before. You get those really intense, beautiful, rich coating of the glass.
Exactly. Yeah. I always leave some glasses after a tasting for the next day, because after that I can I know that rum is really, really good quality. Yeah, because you know the smell is still inside the glass, empty glass. So yeah, I like that. I always do that.
Yeah. And what I've found with a rum that's been dosed up with additives or sugar, if you leave that glass out overnight and you come back to it the next day, it's terrible. It's not enjoyable. Now, I'm not saying that people's flavour, if you want to drink a rum that's been heavily dosed with sugar, I'm not saying it's bad, it's your choice, but you put 2 glasses side by side, one with a pure rum that's had nothing added, and another rum that's been heavily dosed with whatever additive or sweetener. The one that's been dosed with a sweetener really is not very nice the next day. It's worlds apart. That was a little test that I stumbled upon by accident once again. So any questions on Dead Reckoning Antigua? Nope.
I get some notes of an old wooden structure in it. It's very nice.
Antigua rum is very, I'll call it wood driven or oak driven. So in the past, Antigua Rum Distillery have used wood chips in their barrels as well to really drive that oakiness home. Whether they do that with all of theirs, I don't know, but I do know they have used the addition of wood chips inside of their oak barrels. What are we moving on to next, Chris?
Barbados Peaks. Spanish.
All right.
Spanish Peaks finish.
So there's no surprises as to where this rum may have come from. Like anything that I bring out from Barbados, I send a proof of my label to Richard Seal, who, in very short words, an answer of yes or no. He's not into huge, long discussions. He's a very busy man, but I normally send a copy of my label, and he'll send me a picture of a thumbs up as to whether I use the word Foursquare on it. Now, I purposely don't use the word Foursquare on the front of my labels. I don't believe in capitalising on a distillery by putting the name of the distillery in big bold letters on the front of my labels. I think, one, the rum should speak for itself. Two, I think people take the piss too often and have these giant words across the front of their releases in big bold letters saying Foursquare, and then maybe their brand in small letters underneath. I don't believe in that. I'll only ever put it on the description on the back. And Richard approves of it, so he's given the thumbs up there, which is good. This particular rum was aged in Barbados for 8 years in a bourbon cask. It's a pot and column steel blend, like a lot of Foursquare's releases. unless you've been lucky enough to try their 100% pot still releases, which are just absolutely amazing. 8 years tropically aged, and then I got hold of a 40-year-old Pedro Rodriguez PX cask out of a barrel broker. So I found a cask that had been used for 40 years to age PX in southern Spain and bring it into Australia. I then put the Barbados rum into this cask for 6 months. Now, what I find quite astounding is some people choose to age some of their rums in PX or sherries or ports or fortified wine casks for years and years, which I just couldn't get away with here in South Australia. The way that it's aged here, I think it's like dog ears. It's quite rapid. It's quite fast. If I was to leave a rum in a fortified wine cask for 2 or 3 years here, it would be something that tastes like sherry that once was rum. You've lost the flavour profile. It's too intense, which is why you need a smaller amount of time aging here in a fortified wine cask. Now, I got away with the Antigua release for 2 years in that sherry cask, and the reason being it was the 4th time that I've aged a rum in that cask. So over time, you lose the complexity of what was once used in that barrel or housed in that barrel. So I got away with using that barrel for 2 years with the Antigua, but this was a virgin PX cask, and 6 months was all I needed. What I did find was when I took it out of the barrel, I got a lot of tannic or tannins left over from the PX. Now, everyone that's tried red wine or a fortified, the tannins are not a nice thing to be left with on the back palate. And I thought, well, how do I strip the tannins out of this release? I want the PX taste, but I want to remove the tannins. Well, one way is charcoal filtering. And I thought, I don't want to filter my rum. It's not what I'd like to do. How could I achieve that naturally? So I come up with the idea that I'd got a level 3 char bourbon barrel. That heavy charcoal within inside of the barrel should, over time, strip some of the impurities that I didn't like out of the PX. And once again, an experiment. I haven't been doing this for 30 years or 50 years like some master distillers and agers. So I left it in the barrel in a level 3 char, where was it from? Maker's Mark bourbon cask in Adelaide for another year. And after that 1 year, their experiment worked. The heavy char of the barrel, it stripped anything that I found was nasty out of that and left with a more subtle and appealing rum to my palate. Now, like with any PX rum, you should get a lot of dried fruits, figs, sultanas, prunes. With the unmistakable back note that it's an amazing rum from Forcellier Distillery. And that's the other thing, like a blend, you don't want one factor of your rum to overrule the other. So aging in fortified wine casks, like I've said, if you leave it in too long, you're going to have a rum that used to taste like a rum, but now tastes more like PX. The balance between the two could only be a matter of a few extra weeks or a month left in the barrel, particularly through an Adelaide summer. If you went through a week of 45 degrees, that may be too much and push your rum to a flavour profile that you don't want. So one of the good parts of my job is constantly visiting my barrel aging store and taking small samples, trying things, writing in my notepad that's growing more and more every week, and working out, is it heading in a good direction or a bad? If I find that it's going in a bad direction or it's gone too far, then I pull it out that barrel straight away and work out, one, do I want to release it? Two, do I want to put it back into a bourbon cask or change things around, just to keep an eye on the direction and the end result. This was released at 52%. And like with any Barbados rum, you always get that beautiful toffee apple, creme brulee, I'll say caramel on the nose. It's just delightful. But then you get that hint of the PX as well. So any questions on the PX release or the aging process or Australian dry aging or the Foursquare distillery that it came from? It's just a rum that you can sit on all day or all night or all morning if you're sitting in Australia. It really is just a moreish, delicious, very easy drinking rum. It's an easy convert. You know, we talked about trying to convert whiskey drinkers. You know, you're not going to pour them a DOK in their glass and say, here, this is what rum is. You're going to turn them off forever. It's a pretty easy sell when it's a Foursquare of any description, as we all know.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I wanted to say about this rum. This is a rum that I would give to some people that aren't rum drinkers yet.
Yet, correct, yet. Yeah, this was when I converted my father on. He's not a rum drinker, never has been. He grew up with drinking Australian rum and doesn't like it at all. He said it all tasted like poison. It was not a nice rum. The only rum that he did drink was a rum by the name of Goddard's, which is no longer available in the country. And he said, "Oh, you should create that Goddard's. That was the best rum we've ever had." So I started digging through the history books, and it was big in the 60s and 70s. And interestingly, Goddard's was made from Word, West Indies rum distillery, imported in Australia, independent bottler, bottled and labelled here in Adelaide, Australia. I don't know whether it was actually aged here as well. It quite possibly may have been, and they may have stumbled upon Australian dry aging back in the 60s and 70s. I'm unsure on that because the brand is now defunct. It's no longer available. Interestingly, Steve pointed out that someone has actually registered that name again, Goddard's Rum, who lives in Adelaide. I can only hope that they start the brand up again, start getting some Barbados rum into people's glasses here in Australia. So what we'll do, we'll move on to, now if we're going too fast, tell me to slow down. I can sit here and chat about rum all day. But the natural progression for this is to move on to the Barbados 10.5 year. Now, give me 1 second. I'm just going to grab a glass of water. I'll be back in 1 moment. Okay, there we go. So this is an absolutely delightful rum. It's had a bit more time in the barrel. This was a rum that I brought in 400 litres about 3 years ago. And what I did was I aged it in a 60-year-old tawny cask. Now, the reason why I call it tawny is officially you can't use the word port unless it's a barrel out of Spain. The word port, like tequila, is a trademark registered name. So you can't make a tequila in Poland or Australia. You have to call it agave. So it was aged in a 60-year-old tawny cask from a winery in Seppelsfield, which is in a beautiful part of the state of South Australia. Now, they've been making fortified wines and wines in South Australia since the mid-1800s. You got a question, Chris? Nope. Okay. Seppelsfield are the only winery in the world where you can go and visit their winery and taste a port or a tawny aged back anything up to 100 years. And it's quite popular for people to take their parents or their grandparents or their great-grandparents. It might be their 98th birthday, and they'll take them to this winery. You go down into the cellars, you go down to the barrel, and you can try a port from your birth year. Anything back to 100 years of age, which is phenomenal. Now, where they're located is even drier and even less humidity than where I age my rum. It's absolutely intense, which is why they have underground aging rooms to try and slow down this phenomenon and to try and lower the temperature a little. You can't age a fortified wine for 100 years in 45 degrees. There would just be nothing left. So they're trying to actually, reduce the effects of Australian dry aging. So what you get with anything you age in a barrel that's housed a fortified wine for 60 years is an absolutely intense, unbelievable flavour. Now, this particular release spent 8 months in a Seppelsfield tawny cask. And I did send Wes Bergen, Fat Rum Pirate, a bottle of this when I released it in Australia back in 2021, I think it was. And his review was a 5-star. And we all know that Wes, if he doesn't like a rum, he's going to call it shit in a bottle. He's not afraid to voice his opinion, which is, sending a bottle to him is always, it's a double-edged sword. If he doesn't like it, he's not going to hold back and say, Dead Reckoning are bringing out absolute junk. But on the other hand, he's not afraid to give merit where it's awarded as well. And I do remember his words. He did put down that this is the best independently bottled 4-square release I've ever tried to date. And a 5-star review out of Wes, I think, means a lot. There's probably only 4 or 5 reviews a year, maybe, that get a 5-star review. And this one managed to get a 5-star review. But with the rum that you're trying now, compared to the one that Wes tried, it's actually spent an additional 12 months in a bourbon cask. So it's been 8 years in Barbados in a bourbon cask, 8 months in a Seppelsfield tawny cask in Adelaide, South Australia, and then an additional 22 months in a level 3 char Maker's Mark bourbon cask here in Adelaide, South Australia. So I believe it's only got better from what Wes tried to what we've got now. Is just, you can't get better than 5 stars, but you guys are the judge now. I just think that it's managed to go on, head up another level again in flavour complexity. This is a rum for me. When it hits your tongue, it's like honey being poured on your tongue. It wraps around your tongue. It is, how would you call it? A full-bodied experience for your palate. Some rums, they go straight in, straight down your tongue, straight down your gullet. There's not enough left. This wraps around your whole tongue, coats your mouth, and for minutes later, you'll sit there stuck with this profile that isn't going anywhere. It is just a absolutely phenomenal release. On the nose as well, you get that intense, rich tawny cask on the nose. So there's a lot of charred oak in there because it spent essentially 10 years in a bourbon cask and the last 2 years of it in a level 3 char. I get a lot of char, but you get the plums and raisins, you get vanilla, you get desiccated coconut.
I think I need more bottles.
You need more bottles.
Yes, of this one, yeah, for sure.
You're not the
It's a
only
good thing.
one.
It's a good thing it's available in Europe now, that's for sure. I know Knud has been very busy getting it far and wide throughout Europe. I know Richard in Holland in his bottle shop is stocking this at the moment. Hopefully we can find some retailers in Poland and Eastern Europe as well.
Yes, I talked with Knut already about that. So we will try to find a solution for Polish market. So we will see. I have some meetings this week and the next. So yeah, we will see. I'll try. This is very, very good stuff. So also Poland should have this one.
It's phenomenal. It really is. The good news is I have just under 2,000 litres of Foursquare rum in barrels sitting here in Adelaide. So it won't be the only Foursquare release I bring out. I don't want to flood the market with Foursquare either, but I don't think it's a bad decision for a business to be sitting on 2,000 litres of Foursquare of various ages, sitting in various different barrels and experimenting with things. And it's not to say that there won't be a 12 or 14 or a 15-year release coming out of Dead Reckoning for a Foursquare sometime in the future somewhere.
Yeah, that's nice.
It's one of my favourite to date. A lot of people say, what's your favourite rum? And I hate that question because it's like saying, which one of your children don't you like? It's just, it's not an answer I like coming up with. But for the complexity that you get out of this, it's quite amazing. I think one thing I'm very lucky with is Adelaide, South Australia. We have several thousand different wineries across the state. So we're very renowned for Clare Valley, Barossa Valley, and McLaren Vale wines. So for me, within an hour drive, there are more wineries that I could even visit. It's phenomenal, which means there's a treasure trove of barrels that I can get my hands on for aging different rums over different time periods. I've thought about doing some dual maturations as well. So why age a rum in just one barrel? So I believe all rum should spend some time in a bourbon cask. I think it's just its foundations. All rum deserves to be in a bourbon cask at some time. But I'm also going to experiment with some dual cask maturations, possibly several different fortified wines, or a red wine and a fortified, or a champagne, or it's just something that I'll experiment with into the future. So do we have any questions or good points or bad points on the Barbados 10.5 year?
Only good points from me. Only good points. Yeah, I like that. I like that very much. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
was
almost
fortunate-
like eating a dessert and get some
Yes.
buttery notes, melted butter, creme brulee, something like that. Very nice.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a well-described dessert rum. It's not to say you can't drink it for breakfast, but it is a beautiful dessert rum that has that complexity, but also sweetness. And yes, you are impairing a level of sweetness into your rum by using fortified wine barrel, but it's the natural way to do it rather than adding a sweetener or actually adding a sherry into your rum.
I already checked. Only 3 bottles in our friend from Netherlands store. So I need to talk with Knut. I think to get more bottles to Poland.
That's right.
It's not very expensive for that stuff. I think. Yeah. So
The
only
prices with Richard are very competitive.
Yeah.
I think out of memory it was like an 80 euro. Is that right? 85, 89 euro or something for this release.
86, 87.
86, 87 euro for a. Yeah. I think a pretty good price for a 4 square 10.5 year.
Yeah, especially this one, in my opinion. So yeah.
Could you please post the link in the chat, Chris?
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
And if it's out of stock, send an email to Richard and say, please bring it in, I want it, and he'll only order more. There's more sitting in a warehouse in Amsterdam, so by all means hassle him and tell him to order more. And if not, if you've got a local bottle shop that wants it, ask them to stock it, and if they can't or won't or don't, you can always contact me, or I'll give your details to Knud and Johan. Knud being in Paris and Johan in Amsterdam will be able to sort out any bottle shop that may have any interest.
Yeah, I'm in contact with both of these guys. I talked with Johan before our tasting tonight, and he floats somewhere. I didn't ask him, so I don't know where, but he was on his trip. So yeah, we are in touch. So I think there won't be a problem to get these bottles. I think he went to Athens show. Okay. He went to the Athens. Okay, let's go to the next one. I think many of us are curious about this MOBA.
Okay.
Fantastic smell.
Have many people here tried MOBA before in the past? Possibly a MOBA release under their own brand?
Yep,
All of us.
I'm a great fan.
All of us. That's a good answer.
A quick question. Will we really be able to feel all the things from the mutiny after the MOBA?
Yes, you will. Yes.
Okay.
Mutiny is so intense, it'll blow you out of the water. MOBA's good, Mutiny is another level again.
Okay.
That's a surprise.
Fantastic.
The MOBA being 56% and the Mutiny being 65%, so you will taste it. So what's very interesting with the MOBA is distillery in South Africa, Richard Graves, also a bit of a mad scientist, engineer, a bit like Ben from Killick. So makes pretty much all his own equipment, all his own stills. Knud's just put up there as a MOBA Rum fan club page as well on Facebook. So if anyone wants to join that, by all means, look up MOBA Rum fan club on Facebook and join that to keep in contact with what's going on with them. So MOBA being made with fresh pressed sugarcane juice. We'll call it a French style rum or an agricole in a loose term, because it is used only with fresh pressed sugarcane juice. They also use a dunder pit and semi-long fermentation. It is an absolutely phenomenal 100% pot still release, this one. All of their sugarcane is cut by hand, everything. Even the way that they crush their juice is different. So there's a couple of different methods I've seen used. One of them is a hydraulic ram out of an excavator with a very long column. Let's call it a one-story high column, where they put their juice, their sugarcane in there, and this column is essentially pushed down with this giant ram of an excavator crushing the juice. You can tell everything's backyard and made by Adrian, because it's different and it's quite ingenious. MOBA have got amazing different releases, some super high ester, super funky stuff as well. What particularly gained my interest on this one, so once again, I was sent over about 12 to 15 different barrel samples from all different barrels. So we had bourbon casks, whiskey, so American whiskey, and red wine casks as well. So this one being a French oak wine cask from South Africa. Straight away on the nose, yes, you can tell it's an agricole, but it's more refined. Yes, you get that grassiness, but you get that wild, I don't know how to put this one in words. There's funk, there's rawness, there's grassy, I can also you can smell like earth, dirt. That smell that you get when it's been a dry, hot summer and you get that first rain, and you can smell the earth that's just being soaked with that rain. I'm also getting that on the nose as well. Wow. You could sit here and nose this all day. It is just unbelievable. This stood out amongst the samples that were sent across as just, wow, I need to have this straight away. It is amazing. It's 100% pot still. Now, the pot stills, like I said, were handmade, and they're copper pot stills, and some of them are wrapped in stainless, or some of them are actually wrapped in cladding that you would wrap an exhaust in on a super yacht. It's like almost an asbestos blanket wrapped around the still as well, to house its heat and change its performance and profile as well. So 56%, there's very little burn on this. I get a lot of cranberry juice, crisp apples. You also get a slight hint of tropical as well, a little bit of funk there. Now, when I got it to here in Adelaide, I gave it an Adelaide summer in a level 3 char Maker's Mark bourbon cask again. It had some tannins once again when it arrived here, and putting it through the process, which I'd already worked out with the Antigua, is charcoal soothes a rum, particularly aged over a summer period. So a level 3 char, bourbon cask first fill, removed the tannins that you typically get from a red wine and just left it with a very smooth end result. Now, Knud that's joined us, you'll see his name, Strand 101. That's also known as as one of the releases from MOBA. I know Knud was instrumental in playing and blending and working out the perfect mix, and inadvertently come up with his own little blend that was eventually released for MOBA as well.
Has turned off his camera, so I'm not sure he's wearing something now. No, you there?
Cambridge just keeps coming through.
Good
Good
guess.
guess. So he's sitting there in the nude drinking rum, which is good to see, but we don't need to go live on that.
So, yeah, I like it. I really, really, really like this bottle. So this is the second one. I need more bottles for Polish market, for sure, for my tastings. Yeah.
That was one thing I've tried to come up with the Dead Reckoning releases. Everything should be unique and different from the other. How are you, Nud? You good?
Great, thank you. Having a little bit of rum here. Sorry, I didn't have a bottle of the MOBA cask release, so I'm sipping on some 70% Perlaba, but you know, at least it's sugarcane juice. So cheers.
Cheers. Now, is there anything else you want to add about the distillery, Knud? You're going to know it as well as me, or probably better with your history with them as well.
Actually, there was just a thing that I really loved that you said about the French cask and the tannins. It's so true, and it's the thing that when we do the different releases from MOBA, we try to work out in different ways. But actually, on the American oak release that we have, we actually put the rum after being stave aged into bourbon South African whiskey casks that just got char left and doesn't have any tannins in them, exactly to get to that profile that you were talking about, to round them off and to take off the tannins. And actually, even the rum becomes clearer and nicer to look at. It gets this very nice caramel color, whereas before that barrel aging or that finish, you can see the particles in the rum. And yeah, it's a great use of barrels that you're using. Of course, using a first fill Maker's Mark barrel is much more efficient and much quicker. But you get these very nice, and I love the way you do your aging process on all of your products. All of these very nice, punchy, rounded off, but very potent rums. I think that's really your profile that goes into all of your aged stuff. It's got that very particular, very Australian kick to it. That it's just bold and big flavors. I really enjoyed it, and yeah, you did a great job on the MOBA finishing as well. It's it's perfect. And also, another little thing that I discovered is that I love French oak. I mean, I live in France, and here everything is finished in French oak or aged in French oak. I mean, the cognacs, the armagnacs, the Calvados, and so on. But adding the bourbon side to it really gives that smoothness, even though we don't like that word, but that rounded off sweetness of the vanillin from the American oak wood and so on. So it really brings something to the table, and I think also helps open up the rum It helps open up the base of the French casks. It really adds something nice. And as you were saying early on, some companies and some rums, they like to add different types of sweetness and glycerin and all these horrible things to their rums. When you're so fortunate to do really small craft productions and really small craft bottling processes, you can basically get all of those results using barrels. It takes a lot more time. It's more costly, but as you said, the next day in the glass, you can definitely see the difference between a well-worked rum and an artificially produced one. So yeah, I'm just glad to see the tasting here, and glad to join you. And cheers, my friends. Cheers, Chris, and thank you for organizing it. It's lovely, and I'll go back to. Actually, I put on a pair of pants just so. But they finally put the heating on in my building here in France, so I'm happy. Talk to you guys soon. Enjoy.
Thank you. Thank
Okay.
you.
See you. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.
So
Yeah.
the last one.
Go ahead. Yeah. One thing I found is when I do purchase a rum, I find that when I'm handed it or when I buy it, I find let's picture it as a diamond with little rough edges all around it. And nothing wrong with the diamond. You could release the diamond, no worries. But what I find is when you bring it to Australia and you give it secondary maturation or triple maturation like I'm doing, the diamond, you shave off all those little edges and you're just left with the perfect sphere. It creates the round rum, and it really ties in the flavour profile from not only the distillery that you bought, but the secondary or triple maturation that I quite often put the rums under. So I think we're left with the big hitter, and this will be quite interesting for everybody.
My comment before we start is that my journey with Death Reckoning project started from this one, from Mutiny. So I'm super curious now how it tastes after all these rums we tasted before. So yeah, this is my journey now, I think.
Where it started. I'm very lucky to live a very close distance to the South Pacific Distillery. So for legal terms, I can't mention where the distillery is in the South Pacific, but all of you can. So the South Pacific Distillery has been running for approximately, 20 years. They have a John Doerr double retort pot still configuration. So very similar to your Worthy Parks, Hampton, Foursquare have got this kind of setup as well. One thing that they do have in their favour is intense temperatures and high humidity, so very tropical, and also an abundance of sugarcane grown on the island. Now this is the third release that I brought out from South Pacific Distillery. The first release was Australia only. There's also a second release that came out in conjunction with this into Europe and the US. So the second release is a 10-year-old musket cask, also available through Richard in Holland in his bottle shop, and hopefully Chris can post a link to his bottle shop as well to everybody. And this is the 20-year-old 100% pot still, 100% tropically aged. So 99.99% of all the rums you've tried from South Pacific Distillery in the past are going to be a blend of tropically aged and then the rest aged in main run company in Liverpool and in a shear in Holland. It's very rare to get hold of a 100% tropically aged rum out of them because they just don't sell to anyone. They're just not interested. Luckily, I have a very good working relationship with the distillery, and they're more than happy to keep supplying me their amazing product. So over the 20 years of aging, this had an 85 to 90% angel share, which is phenomenal. So essentially, I had to buy 10 barrels worth of rum and blend them all into one to be able to come up with a 200-litre release. You're left with syrup at the bottom of your barrel. Now, on the nose and on the palate, you can understand that essentially what we're drinking is the syrup on the bottom. The flavour intensity of this is another level again. Now, fortunately, I'm with a group of people that can understand the flavour profiles I'm about to put forward. So one of them is burnt rubber, freshly laid bitumen. Now, having worked on boats for many years, it smells like the bilge of a boat. Now, the bilge is the very bottom part of the boat where all the water and oil and diesel and mess ends up on the bottom of the boat. Now, I've tried telling various people these flavour profiles, and they just can't believe that I'm describing a rum as diesel fumes, oil, burnt rubber, and bitumen. But I think you can appreciate that it can actually be a beautiful thing, particularly when we're talking about South Pacific rum of this age and quality as well.
It reminds me of one rum I was absolutely not expecting, namely 970 from Madeira. And the note I'm getting both there and here, I would describe as getting slapped in the face with driftwood. So some wet wood that came out of the sea into the beach, and you're getting slapped in the face with that. So like that's the note I'm getting in both.
I often describe this as getting punched in the face by a Fijian.
Although it has much less minerality than a few other Fijis that I have tried, I'm not sure if I would immediately identify it as Fijian. It's amazing, but it's not. It has less minerality than I would expect.
Fijian rugby player.
Yes, very well described. I think maybe the Fijis that everyone's tried in the past, it's because it's been a continental and tropically aged blend. When I say blend, aged in two different continents. So anything that aged in Liverpool or Amsterdam is a very, I'll call it subtle and rounded flavour and very refined. The continental aging is a lot slower, whereas aging in the tropics is like jumping in a Grand Prix car for 20 years and just driving at full speed around the Nuremberg Ring. It is intense. It's got there fast. It's a full-on flavour. So with this, I get a lot of stewed apples and rhubarb, sultanas, blackcurrant juice, but also the intense flavours like I described, bitumen, diesel, burnt rubber. And the first time I tried this, my mind instantly went Caroni. The thing I could tie it closely to was a Caroni straight away. A very close, I almost called it a cousin, I guess would be a Caroni rum.
One of my friend, maybe this is a question to Knut or Johan maybe, asked if the South Pacific is available in Adelaide. Adelaide is in Switzerland.
Is it available in Adelaide?
Yeah.
There's this. So it's a conundrum that I have. When I release Dead Reckoning in Australia, it sells out in anything up to 24 hours, which is a good and bad thing to happen, because if you're not on the ball, people miss out. But yes, I do know it is available in Adelaide. There's a few bottle shops that I supplied that are still sitting on a little bit of stock. So if they do want some of this out of Adelaide, I can point them in the right direction. Just give them my contact details.
He wrote me, it is in Australia, but his friend going in December there. So okay, I'll talk with this guy. I thought he has something different in his mind. So
yep, that's fine.
Yeah, we will fix it. Oh, no problem.
Yep, easy. It's also available with Richard out of Holland. So if he wants a lot quicker, easier method, Richard in Holland has this in stock. Now the US managed to get the next level again. I released this stock into Europe a little quicker than the US, and the US managed to get a 21-year-old release. So Europe got the 20-year-old, and then the US managed to get a 21-year-old.
Okay.
Yeah.
I did a quick side-by-side, and in my opinion, it's closer to 970 from Madeira than Kildeville Caroni.
There you go.
Yep, I agree. I get the same notes of an old wet barrel that I get from the Madeira rum, and I like it very much.
It's a good description, an old wet barrel. It's almost like a musty, almost on the verge of moldy barrel.
Exactly. On the verge of getting moldy.
Yes.
Still tasty, but
still very tasty.
Pavel, do you understand why is the mutiny is on the end now?
Sorry, what?
Do you understand, Pavel, now why the mutiny is the last one today?
Yes, absolutely. It was not there on the nose. It was definitely there on the palate.
Yeah.
Why it's the last? Yeah. On the nose, it seemed like much tamer than Hoba, but it was just sneaking upon us.
It depends, of course, when you drink it. Is it morning or evening? And do you start it from it or not? So you know that.
Now I've tried this.
I'll actually leave some for the morning.
But for me, still, this is my first love in this lineup, in this project, and I really like it.
This is quite an achievement to beat the MOBA in intensity.
Yeah.
South Pacific rums are, I think, underrated. They're not talked about enough in the rum world. Yes, it's been brought out by a lot of different independent bottlers so far, but I still think it's an underrated rum that hasn't got the attention that it deserves.
But hasn't Plantation bought all the aged stock? So all the aged stock that's not with Plantation is already at share, basically. You cannot buy directly from the distillery itself currently aged stock, right? Because Plantation bought everything they had some time ago.
Well, everyone but me. I have a very close relationship with the distillery, and I have access to their amazing barrel warehouse.
Oh, so like Knut just messaged us that like Plantation bought the right to choose. So apparently that was like a secret barrel that Plantation didn't notice. The one you got.
Yes, that's right.
Justin, I will remember what you. about your connections, with South Pacific.
Yes, yeah. So this won't be the only one, the only release. So I think this is like I said, the third release for South Pacific Distillery, and there's definitely more on the cards in the future. Just because it's such a wonderful product. Even their young product, 2-year-old, 3-year-old pot still rum out of Fiji is just a phenomenal rum. It doesn't need to be 20, 21 years old to come out of the distillery. A young product out of South Pacific is still, head and heels above some of the rest out there. Any questions on South Pacific? It certainly stands out from the crowd, and like Chris said, there's a reason why it was put on the end of the tasting list.
And this South Pacific in general, I don't know much about them, but do they have column stills also, or is it just pot still?
They do have column stills as well. So they do put out a lot of white rum and aged white rum as well. And they do have a pot and column still combinations. Some of my previous releases have been in pot and column still combinations. But like this one, I opted for the 100% pot still just because I call it a bulldozer of rum. It's in your face. It's intense. And I think their John Doe double retort still configuration, along with 100% tropically aged, is a force to be reckoned with.
Thank you.
There's only one Fiji rum that I've chosen to do secondary maturation, and that was the first release I brought into Australia. It was a muscat cask or a fortified wine cask. I think it was 9-year-old South Pacific rum. Was the first release I brought out into Australia 3.5 years ago. But what I find is their rum is so intense when it comes out of the distillery that I don't choose to secondary age it. There's nothing needed to be done. Looking at some of the direction for the future for Dead Reckoning, what you're seeing in front of you now is literally the tip of the iceberg. So yes, I've been up and running now for, like I said, December this year will be 4 years. The Dead Reckoning has been conceived or up and running. Out of everything that you've tried today, there's 2 more releases that are available in Europe. So there's a 55% Australian release from a distillery in Queensland, which I can't name, but Steve, one of our guests, may or may not have worked for that distillery in the past. So that's now available in Europe, and it's also an unbelievably complex and delicious rum. I think it's a 9-year-old rum. It's a pot and column still release. And the second one was the South Pacific Muscat Cask, which I was talking about. So if you liked the 20-year-old you just tried then, there's a Muscat Cask release also available currently through the bottle shop in Holland through Richard.
Yeah.
And that is testing my memory now, I think it's a 10-year-old Muscat Cask. It had a quite interesting little history. So it was distilled in 1991, aged for 10 years. So ready for the market in 2001. Then South Pacific Distillery didn't know what to do with this rum, didn't know how to release it, didn't know what to call it. And that's some of the complexities of owning a big distillery with lots of chiefs and not enough Indians, is making a decision, what do we call it? What's our label? Where do we market it? Versus myself. So I'm a one-man band. I have no employees. I do everything myself. I bottle, I label. My 13-year-old children help me bottle and label my bottles when it goes to release. So when I come up with an idea, I have to ask one person whether he likes it or not, and that's me. I sit there and think, do I want to release this? What do I call it? What's the artwork? What's the tasting notes? I answer to no one but myself. And of course, my wife, which everyone always answers to their wife. So it makes my route to market a lot easier. I don't need to double check. So the Fiji cask was ready in 2001, but they didn't know what to do with it. So it sat in a stainless steel vat in time suspension for 21, 22 years. And it wasn't until I started saying, what else have you got in your barrel warehouse? And they said, oh, we've got this project from 1991. We don't know what to do with it. We don't know what to call it. We will send you a sample.
And I think it's dismissive that you call it was a time suspension, because it doesn't age from the wood, but it definitely calms down, and there is something happening with the liquid in stainless steel tank over the years, right?
Correct. It refines things. It's not aging. A lot of distilleries. So Sampan rum out of Vietnam. Sampan age, we'll call it age, as we know it's not. They house their rum in stainless steel vats for 6 to 12 months, just to let it settle, just to let it. So if you look at it from a correct, so Knud's just put it up there. Alcohol molecular structures. If we look at it from a scientific point of view, if you've got a bunch of moleculars that haven't joined, that are floating around, let's put in a stainless steel vat, these moleculars tend to join. And for a layman's point of view, if you can imagine an anchor chain of an anchor on a boat that is smashed into 1,000 pieces, in time, over time, in a stainless steel vat, that anchor chain joins again. The molecular structures join up, and you are left with the original flavour that the distiller wanted. It's just that the process and the mixing and potentially watering it down and bringing it down to a different ABV has broken the anchor chain. Only time in either a barrel or stainless steel will join the molecular structures again. The anchor chain will once again join.
Has anyone done any science on the limits? Because I could imagine that possibly like 2 years in a stainless steel vat are much better than like 0 or 2 months, but possibly on after like 5 years, it reaches the equilibrium and chemically there's like nothing happening. Has anyone done the science about like what is going on over the years in stainless steel?
We're going to have to delve deep into the rum geek world on this one. One person I did speak to this about was Maggie Campbell. So Maggie worked for Privateer, and Maggie first brought this up with me. And it's just written on the French islands, they do this. And the French have probably been doing this for 300 years, unknowingly. From a scientific point of view, they've probably just gone, oh, this tastes way better after 2 years than it does 10 years. That would be a really interesting question. And Chris, that may be your next podcast now, is to delve into the uber geek world of molecular structures and flavor complexity. But you're completely correct. Time in suspension, and I call it suspension because it technically doesn't age, definitely increases the quality of a product. Definitely.
Also, we have like all the science. Basically, if you can do how is it called, spectrography. Basically, I know that I've heard that Luca does it a lot. Basically, getting chemical analysis, basically translating all the flavor into like few hundred numbers, getting all the compounds and all their amounts. This technology is there. I know that various distilleries do this analysis. So basically, for the same liquid doing the same tests like every half a year for 10 years, I guess we could get like how initially it changes kind of fast, and at some point it stabilizes, hardly any change after that point.
Yeah, well, the whole problem is there are too many variations on this team. Like there's a rum company called D'Arbousier in Guadeloupe, and their specialty is cleaning up bad rum. So they don't say people or tell people how they do, but I've gathered that what they use is like a propeller made of copper, and they push 20,000 liters through this tube very quickly and clean up, air up the rum. So if they have a dirt profile or a rotten profile because the canes were wet, then they can get rid of it. So basically, a lot of the rum producers in Guadeloupe, they come by their place when they have a bad batch of rum, and then they put it through their machine that their grandfather invented, and then it comes out on the other side perfect. So that's one variation. On Martinique, they do, you know, the very, very high end, very super expensive white rums that you can see from Nesson and from some of the other companies, you know, €140 white rums that has spent 5 years in a steel vat, maturing, as they call it.
Actually, again, why do they keep it in the steel vat instead of copper vat? Like from the previous thing you said, copper vat would probably be more effective in a way.
Too expensive.
Oh, okay. Yeah, makes sense.
You know, we're talking about vats containing 10,000 liters, 20,000 liters. If you had to make them out of copper, that's a problem. And then, of course, you have the oxidation of the copper. So do you want to clean it every time? I mean, there's a lot of different angles on that. And then you have the problem also is do you just let it in the steel vat? Is the steel vat open or closed? And then there's a next problem. Some places, because they don't want the steel vats to be open because stuff can fall down into them. So what
also,
they do
like the angel share of open vat must be like hilariously bad.
Well, it's not that bad. It's normally it's like a couple of percent, 3 to 5%. We see it in the glass casks that MOBA does in South Africa, where you know they're sitting there in these 50-liter damjans of glass demijohns with a little piece of textile on top of them. So there is evaporation going on, but it's only between 3 to 5% a year compared to 20% or even more in a wooden cask. But then in some of the cases, they have these closed steel vats, and then they have a little ventilator going on. So with the ventilator, you are taking out alcohol, right? You know, the air coming in and replacing it with fresh air. So then something happens there. There are other places where they want to do the same, but they want to have a quicker result. So what you do is you put in a little, like a magnetic swirler at the bottom, you know, like in a blender, and then you just have that going away. So the rum is continuously in movement. I mean, there are hundreds of different ways to mature or to better your rum in these ways. What is incredible, I don't think they did any of these smart tricks in the South Pacific Rum Company to make the 10-year-old we were talking about before, but the result is definitely there. I mean, it's so powerful, but with absolutely no defects in it, no faults, no irritating alcohol molecules so between what Justin said with the anchor chain being built up again and me saying that it's the light alcohol molecules that get away from it, so whatever should have been taken away in the cuts of the heads and the tails that were left in, well, those go away, and the good stuff forms the anchor chain again, and then you have this beautiful results. But there is almost no way to well, there is, but it's such a huge job to scientifically put it up into, you know, little boxes, because everybody's doing it in a different way. And what's interesting
but like of course, like everyone does it in a different way, but my point is, when you have the same liquid in the same still tank, if once a year you do spectrography, you see how initially the numbers of each compound were changing a lot, and at some point I don't know what's the number, but I expect 20 years was probably too long, and maybe it's after 5 years, maybe after 7, maybe after 10. At some point, it basically stabilized, and the impact afterwards was negligible.
I would say when you do it optimized, as Justin was saying, the French have been doing these kind of things for the last 300 years, so they kind of know what they're doing. The oldest I've seen is 5. So I'm guessing that after 5 years in optimum conditions, with ventilation going on and with all of that stuff happening, really optimum conditions, that's when you reach the peak of a product. And that's when you really can't make it any smoother or nicer to drink. But again, it is a very cost, how to say this? First of all, before you even start doing that, you have to put in a really, really good product if you want to sell a white unaged rum, first of all. And then, so already just there, the rum you're putting in is very expensive. And then, of course, even if it's only 5% angel share, if it's 5% angel share for 5 years, you're still losing 25% of this super precious liquid. I mean,
by the way, do you know if this is what the distillery Simon in Martinique, A17 and 10, they are fine for me are the poster child of expensive, super high quality white rum.
Yeah, but they're a whole different story, because they started off creating the foundation for the distillery on selling aged rums from other distilleries that they would do secondary aging on and do the bottling. So all the beautiful...
Really?
Yeah, of course. So you can find all the first A1710 releases were all these beautiful cognac-looking bottles made by other people. And then when they had enough money, they did the first La Perle after building their own pot still and making the rum the way that they wanted to make it. And I followed the whole story very, very closely. And then they came out with La Perle, and I was like everybody else hoping for La Perle to be incredible, and it wasn't, because most of the white rums that when they come out of a new pot still, they're not very good. You have to, like break in the pot still, like cook it very well before it starts coming. I mean, Renegade did the same mistake with their first editions rums that I also followed, and I was looking forward to try. What are you saying? I can't hear you.
I tried the Pearl Brut a few years ago, and I was quite impressed.
No. La Brut is incredibly good.
Okay.
That is my favorite of all time. It's like if you want an agricole rum from Martinique that represents what Martinique is, that is the one you want. The half liter
I like Renaissance even more than Pearl, and I was a funny story about that, because I was in Martinique. And I was in some small shop next to the beautiful library they have. And like the guy gave me some white rum to try and said, "Oh, it's great, but it's very expensive. It's not as great as expensive it is." And we went away and we were somewhere else. And like 10 or 15 minutes have passed, and I still was feeling the taste in my mouth. And I was like, whoa, what the hell just happened? I never ever in my life encountered a finish on rum that lasts like 15-20 minutes. That shouldn't be possible. And that's why when I realized that Renaissance is outstanding, and I actually went back next day, and that was Sunday, they were closed. And I was going on Monday morning leaving the Martinique, so I had to actually get this one in France. But I was really mind blown that something that's like good but not outstanding at first, it has like one of the longest finishes I've ever encountered.
Yeah, but that's because the Renaissance is basically, I mean, I didn't make it and I wasn't there, but I tried it as well, and it's like a polished off version of La Brut.
Yeah.
So, what I really loved about the La Brut was the fact that it actually tasted that it had those defects. It tasted a little bit like gasoline. So for me, I described La Perle as as you're standing in a field in Martinique, you're standing in the sugarcane field, you're looking at the sea, and then you have this old Citroen car that drives by, you know, with the exhaust just throwing out the gasoline fumes, and you can smell the freshness, the iodine from the sea, and you got the green and sweet from the sugarcane, and you know, it's like that's one of the things I love the most about rums, and Dead Reckoning is also one of those rums. It makes you travel. It's like in a glass. You're sitting there in where are you sitting right now? Are you sitting in Poland?
No, London.
Sorry?
London.
You're sitting in London. So you're sitting in London. It's gray and rainy outside. There's a storm coming by. And then you pour yourself a little glass of rum, and then you had a one-way trip to a Caribbean island, or in this case, as we did tonight, with a one-way trip to Australia. And it's the best thing. I mean, for me, that is one of the things that makes rum so incredible, besides the fact that it's the most versatile spirit and that you can find any kind of taste in rum. But yeah, no, and one last thing on A1710, just for anybody who wants to know, they're not an AOC Martinique since they use a pot still. So they
so they are like the St. James Coup de Chou.
Exactly. So they do their own way, but they cannot be called an AOC Martinique, and that's really funny because for a very long time, most of French people were going, "Oh yeah, but you can only make rum in this way, and there's no way to do it in another way." And then these guys came along and said, "Well, we don't care. We just want to make rum in Martinique, but we don't care."
But I'm surprised that it has Martinique on the label. I thought like all the fight about AOC of Barbados, you can make still whatever you want in Barbados. You cannot call it Barbados rum, and the Renaissance actually does have Martinique on the label.
Yeah, but it doesn't say AOC.
Oh no, it doesn't. It doesn't. Also, speaking about traveling to the place, my favorite whiskey reviewer said he's actually Scottish, so he's in Scotland. Says rum is a liquid sunshine, like Caribbean sunshine in a liquid.
Of course it is, and that's, I mean, that's why in countries like Denmark and Czech Republic and now Poland coming on, and of course France enjoys our rum so much because it's the best way of getting some sunshine. I mean, hey, and some warmth. I mean, as soon as the weather started going bad here in Europe, people were going into the liquor stores and buying rum again, and they hadn't done that for like 4 months because, you know, who needs liquid sunshine to have it on a street terrace? But now it's colder, it's windier. A little bit of 70% is always nice to warm you up.
I'm a huge fan of your highest 75%. I'm a huge fan.
Holiday vacation in a glass.
Exactly, holiday vacation in a glass. I mean, that's exactly what you were talking about when you talked about the foundation of your company. Yeah, and that you weren't really ready to leave the Caribbeans yet. You weren't ready to you know, leave all that behind. You wanted to keep on being in that world, and that's definitely what we're in. I mean, hey, a little rum and coke, a little pure rum in the glass. I'm happy.
Yeah, that's a pretty good way of describing it. Probably inadvertently, I didn't know that I was trying to not let go of my past or my history or my roots, working on the boats and working pigs.
Yeah, you're just working on them. Yeah, I mean, and you're doing that in a great way where you're sharing your love and passion for all of these different places with the rest of the world. I mean, hey, couldn't be better than that.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's a lot more. There's a lot more sitting in barrels. So Chris asked, where am I going in the future? There's probably, at this stage, I think I've got 40 different releases sitting in barrels at the moment.
Looking forward to getting some of them.
Yeah, they'll be going to Europe, the US, and Australia. Who knows what other new markets are going to open up in the future? I don't know. So I've still got some Antigua in barrels that's been aging for a lot longer than what we've just tried. Like I mentioned, there's several thousand litres of Barbados. We've got some Venezuela on the horizon, some nice aged Venezuela. We've got some Pierre Labat, pronounced correct there, Knud?
Père là-bas.
Pierre Labat. There we go. My French is getting
Père, like father, not Pierre, like yeah.
Yeah. Some Labat. We have some more South Pacific. We've got some Jamaican in the pipeline as well. There's just so much there, it's hard to even remember.
Do you think it's going to be possible to get any unaged South Pacific?
Yes. Yeah, that's not a problem. Yep. We can
Even pot
work out
still?
an unaged.
Yeah, from pot still or column.
Whatever I want.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Because I don't think an aged pot still from Fiji is like on the market for people without your level of connections.
There you go. There's an opening into the market.
Yeah,
Yes, go for it.
I would definitely enjoy trying out a pure pot still unaged from South Pacific just to see, what more or less what the base is before you start the aging process.
Yeah.
I mean, even if it's just a small release like the Killick or something, but just for us super geeks that are still here, I think we are 9 people left, and we are all. How to say this, so interested in the whole process of how you can how you transform the rum from point A to point Z, it's like the journey there that's interesting. And
that's why we chose to bring the Killick unaged, just to show you how good that can be straight off the still.
Please bring us that. Also, I guess you are an ambassador of South Pacific to the rest of the world and all the rum geeks when the plantation are like holding to the all mainstream stuff. Like, I guess you can be ambassador for the geeks.
Yeah, guys, I think I can see the future. We have to do the next meeting. And when I heard everything from Justin and about his plans, I think we will do that soon, very soon.
There's a release that you missed out on. It was Australia only, so it was a Jamaica 3 distillery blend, and I managed to, by mistake, get hold of the Dead Reckoning Barbados tawny cask or port cask. I managed to get goodbye, boys. Sorry, just saying goodbye to my kids to school. Bye-bye. I managed to get hold of a barrel that was 100 years old. Well, it was actually 120 years old. So it held tawny or port in it for 120 years. They were doing a clean out of their barrel warehouse, and there was this old thing that was just covered in an inch thick of dirt and dust and grime. And I brought it back to my barrel warehouse, and I thought it's so dirty that I need to clean it. Like, I can't go anywhere near it without just getting covered head to toe in this inch thick of cobwebs and dirt. So I just got a soapy brush and just hosed it down. I thought I just have to give it a little bit of a clean before I push it in. And it had a stamp on the end that a cooper had hit it with a hammer and a metal stamp. And it was a German cooper that came over here called Schangeninger. Now, he closed down in the 1890s. So the barrel that I hold of at the absolute youngest was 1890s. But he was operating from the 1860s onwards. So that release, unfortunately,
probably more like 150 years, not 100 years.
Yeah,
it could be. So I aged a Jamaican rum in that barrel for 1 year, and it was just unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. But the good news is I now have a 4 Square rum. I'm just going to close this door because my son's making a lot of noise. There we go. Yeah, I now have a 4-square rum aging in a 120, 150-year-old port cask. So there's
That's
something to the
also
jig.
ex-Jamaican rum. I guess that also makes an impact.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I've also got a Guyana release. It's a 3-still blend out of Guyana. So a Voisais, the Enmore, and the Port Morant stills. A 3-still blend from Guyana aging in a musket cask. So I haven't got my barrel book. I'd be here for an hour telling you what's coming out in the future, but all I can say is the future's looking bright for Dead Reckoning releases. You're going to be seeing a lot more coming in the future, and I don't want to bring out releases that are like each other. I want, like Knut describes it, it's a holiday vacation in a glass. Everything's different. Everything's got that Australian twist or Australian edge to it. Everything's been Australian dry aged, and it's 99% it's aged in ex-fortified wine or wine barrels from South Australian wineries.
Do you have some minimum age that you use, like of this dry aging? I mean, pardon my French and the analogy, like the plantation always does some time in cognac before releasing. So I know that you do a little bit of dry aging in Australia on all the releases, but I wonder what is your minimum age you do that?
The rum answers that question for me, not a marketing minimum. So if I think it's ready after 1 week or 10 years on my flavor profile or my palate,
okay,
rather than something that I want to write on a label.
Oh yeah, sure, but like you don't need to write it, but like in your experience, does it ever happen after 1 week, or typically it's more like half a year, or like what's the usual?
6
Like
months.
I know there are always exceptions. What?
6 months. 6
Okay,
months has
yeah,
been the minimum. Yeah, 6 months. Some of them have come to age immediately, and the longest has been 2 years. But now I've had rum in barrels in Adelaide now for 4 years. So, yeah. In particular, there's a Barbados bourbon cask. I've just had it sitting there, and that's a long-term project. So I bought it.
Are you decanting to a smaller bottle to reduce the angel share? Because I remember I was very surprised when I have learned that Appleton, to do their 50-year-old rum, they actually every few years decant to smaller cask, or like do 10 casks that are 95% full to 9 casks that are 100% full, basically to drastically reduce the angel share. Are you doing something similar? Or you just leave it there?
Yeah, I just leave it there. Not at this stage. Yeah. It'll all turn out over time. We'll see what direction we head in. Like I said, it's good.
Justin, go back to your 20-year-old Fiji. How many barrels did it start off by being? More or less.
10 barrels.
10 barrels. Yeah.
10 barrels. It started off to be able to come up in the end with 1 barrel.
Yeah. So, I mean, when you're doing such long tropical aging processes, you need barrel consolidation, because if not, it's insane. I mean, I visited distilleries that didn't do barrel consolidations, like Travelers in Belize, and at the end, they thought they had so and so much rum, and they didn't at all, because most of their barrels were half filled or 1/4 filled. So when they started emptying them out, they were like, oh shit, we didn't have 200 barrels. We actually only had 20 barrels, so it's, yeah. But did can't hear you.
You should be able to hear me now.
No, I can hear you.
Don't they weight the barrels to have an idea how much is left? That would be a very easy thing to do.
It's not as easy as it sounds, because many times the distilleries, well, it all depends. If you're talking to a very modernly run distillery like Santa Teresa in Venezuela, where you have computer programs and you have, pallets and systems and, all of that going on, they have normally 99% full control of what's going on in their aging warehouses. But I would say that in maybe I don't know, 30-40% of the warehouses around the world in smaller, not bought up by big groups, distilleries. They have no idea. And also sometimes, I mean, just take Moba. If we have a ready brandy cask, then it just came out, it's still wet. So we will have the angel share, but we won't have that big of a devil's share because the barrel won't suck up the rum. But in other barrels where we do the toasting and we re-toast the barrels at the distillery and all of that, when you pour in the rum, you lose 8 to 15% of the rum. I mean, it's insane. So,
and I guess it's within first few hours, not even years. It's within first few hours if it's the devil's share, right?
Yeah, well, sometimes it takes a week, but Robert, for example, at the distillery, not to waste barrel space, he tops off the barrels after 2 weeks or 3 weeks with more rum, just to make sure that the rum is in contact with all of the wood. And normally it's about, I think it's 6.5–8%. That's very normal to lose on the devil's share, on the share that goes into newly toasted barrels. And then at the end of the year, so you lost 15–18% between the devil's share and the angel share. And yeah, anyway, it's the fun thing about rum is that the smallest details in the aging process, in the fermentation process, in the distillation process, in the steel vats or the wooden vats or whatever you do, every little small detail has such a huge impact. I mean, how come all of Justin's releases, all of the age releases have a similar, well, not a similar, but has a distinct profile, even though they come from so many different countries and different distilleries? And that's, you know, the climate, the barrels, the choice of when to stop the aging process or the finishing process. So yeah, no, that's again,
the rum is most diverse because it's the most degrees of freedom in a way.
Yeah, and it's such an interesting world to be a part of, because I've now been in the rum world, let's say more or less 20 years, actually enjoyed my rums for the last 27 years. And I'm learning new things almost every day, and if not every day, every week. And I see new things and I hear new things. And every time I think I know more or less what there is to know about it, you learn something new, and a new detail and new process. And as Justin was saying, his Australian dry aging, it only happens in very few countries. But I have another example for you. The New Grove rums from Gray's Distillery in Mauritius, their warehouses are so dry, and it's just their warehouses, and they're located at Grand Bay, a big now seafront side where people go on holiday. But I used to live there when I was a kid, and anyway, that warehouse, when you want to visit it, they tell you, well, just wait a second. They open the doors and then they turn on the ventilators to pull out the alcohol fumes in the warehouse, because if not, you can't walk in there. And the hydrometry inside the warehouse there is so little water in it, and it's all alcohol. So it's so dry, if you want, that the water is actually the only thing going out, because the air is already filled with alcohol. So they have exactly the same as Justin is having, with a plus a couple of percent or even more per year in alcohol on their older barrels. So they start aging, let's say, a rum, or re-aging a rum that's already at 60%, and then they age it for another 4 or 5 years before they put it on the market. And then in those 4 or 5 years, the rum goes up to 65 or 66%. So,
to my best knowledge, most of the bourbons experience the same thing. It's so dry, the alcohol goes up.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure of that. And also because of the way their warehouses are made.
Justin, I think we have to go to other meeting.
Have a great evening, guys. Nice to see you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Justin, for your time, and thank you for getting up so goddamn early to drink rum with us.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. everyone for joining us, and Chris, thank you so much for organising this. And I really hope that you know, in the future, with probably another half a dozen releases, we can sit down and do the same thing.
Definitely, let's do.
Yeah.
And get some NH South Pacific from the positive, please.
Okay, guys, one more time. Thank you very much, Justin. I'm impressed. You know that. And I really thank you very much for your accept and here and tell us everything about your project and you personally. So I hope we will meet soon somewhere. And
I'll be in Europe next year, so that may happen.
yeah. And I wish you all good rams in your project in the future.
Thank you very much. Keep an eye out for Dead Reckoning. Lots to come. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.